He is one of the richest nobles in the entire kingdom. He didn't need to be walking among the poor, walking among those who have no magic. And on top of that, he's also handsome. When he sees any kind of cowardice, he resorts to violence. He can even see people's potential, so he'll be a great ruler. It seems his maid has great potential, and that's me seeing it with my own eyes. Just kidding. She really does have great potential. The patriarchs of small towns even want to marry him off to their daughters. For an old medieval world, he's a true genius. And what if, with knowledge from another life, he could make everyone use magic? I'll tell the story from the beginning so you don't get confused. He died of a heart attack from working too much, but when he opened his eyes again, he was somewhere else. A system window welcomes him to the magical continent of Eldoria. When he looks to the side, he realizes his body is different and now even looks like a girl. A week went by quickly. His maid with her big melons brought him tea. The effeminate man thanks the big melons. After dying as an industrial mechanic, he reincarnated into the body of Edgar Wren. Wren Edgar is the third son of the great Duke Aldarian Edgar. The Edgar family is noble and owns a territory of 300,000 square kilometers and around 1 million residents. His relationship with his two older brothers has always been good, and he even has a hot servant pleasing him. In this life, he wouldn't die from overworking until his father called him to his office. He had reached the right age to manage his own territory. His territory will be to the northwest. It's relatively safe, but the lack of mages has become a serious food problem. His father emphasizes this because the Caledorial Empire is unstable. Wren knows that well. The Empire's royal family is in decline and corrupt. Ever since he reincarnated, he feels a lot of care coming from the Edgar family, so he'll do everything to help the people who care about him. The patriarch thought he was putting too much pressure, but he quickly says he'll solve the food problems in that territory. His father says that won't be solved with enthusiasm alone, but he knows that and he knows how to solve it, since he has the wisdom of a century of the Industrial Revolution. Wren then set out for his new domain, Island City, a place full of promise and trouble. To the north was Grand Duke Ryan, a sworn enemy. To the west were the elves, and to the south lay the open sea. Because of its location, the territory had often been a battlefield, leaving the land barren, the population low, and the resources drained. As his carriage rolled toward Island City, Wren studied the documents about his domain. Leia watched him closely, clearly worried. Wren knew that to revive the territory, he needed more people, because workers were the heart of any industrial revolution. He understood how hard it would be, but he believed he could do it, and he wasn't starting empty-handed. The system had given him a special ability. It was called Human Resource Scan, and it let him easily spot talented people. After testing it on his family, he had a solid sense of how talent worked in this world. So when he reached Island City, his first goal was to find exceptional people who could help rebuild it. Meanwhile, Leia remembered Aldine's order: support Wren and make sure he didn't turn the region into chaos. Quietly, she hoped he wouldn't cause trouble. Back in Island City, the city lord's residence was tense. An anxious man reported that the Duke's youngest son would arrive soon and suggested acting first. But the masked man across from him shut that down. He said to wait for orders and not touch Wren yet, though he still wanted Aldine to pay for old wrongs. A blonde man nearby was panicking over fake records and stolen taxes. The masked man only laughed, calling Wren a clueless playboy who'd never notice. He said they just needed to hand him some useless papers. The blonde man reluctantly left to prepare for Wren's arrival. As Wren neared Island City, he looked over the barren fields and abandoned farms, then asked Leia for a map and studied the area carefully. His eyes settled on the river in the west and the harbor in the south. Then he got an idea. A dredged river and a canal to the sea could revive the land. But his thoughts were cut off by a desperate cry. A young girl was on the ground, clinging to a man, probably her father, who was trying to go gamble. She begged him not to waste the last of their money, since it was meant for her mother's treatment. If he lost it, her sick mother would be doomed. Blinded by greed, the man yelled at her to let go. When she refused, he raised his hand to hit her. Before he could, Wren stepped in and knocked him to the ground with one punch. Anger flashed across Wren's face, though he winced right after. It was his first time throwing a punch. Leia hurried over, worried. She lightly scolded him, saying that next time he wanted to hit someone, he should at least warn her so she could bring protection. Wren laughed and said it happened too fast. Then he walked up to the man and told Leia to check on the girl while he handled the gambler. Still holding his face, the man looked up in shock as Wren tore into him for gambling away family money and even trying to hit his own daughter. The gambler frowned and asked who Wren thought he was to interfere. Wren stepped closer and made it clear that didn't matter. If he caught him near a gambling den again, the punishment would be harsh. Wren's cold warning left the man terrified. The gambler quickly swore he'd stay away from gambling and ran off. Satisfied, Wren turned to the girl, who was still frozen, and asked if she was okay. He used his system to check her. The girl, Lillian, bowed and thanked him over and over. She said if that money was lost, her mother would have lost her only chance to live. Looking at the system screen, Wren noticed something interesting in her stats. Most of them were normal, but one trait stood out. She had great talent for farming and harvesting. Seeing that, Wren decided to recruit her for his plan to restore the land. Wren smiled and guessed she was headed into the city to find a doctor for her mother. Since they were going there too, he invited her along. Lillian hesitated, worried she'd dirty the carriage. Wren just smiled and told her a carriage was only wood on wheels, nothing more. Clean or dirty didn't matter, and he wanted to ask her a few things too. Then his face turned serious. He asked why a gambling den could exist in a place this poor. He thought about what the region had gone through. Last fall, Grand Duke Ryan's soldiers attacked and killed many people. Then in early spring, floods wrecked the land and pushed everyone closer to ruin. As he moved through the city, Ren decided he needed a full census to learn how much labor the city still had left. But first, he wanted to inspect the city lord's manor, check the reserve funds, and see what could be used for rebuilding. He asked Lillian where the manor was. Before she could answer, someone shouted. A blonde man on horseback charged down the street, yelling for people to get out of the way. Leah reacted at once and yanked Ren aside just before the horse rushed past. The rider kept going like nothing had happened. Leah glared after him, furious. Anyone who threatened Ren deserved to pay. Her protective grip tightened so much that Ren could barely breathe, and he had to call out to her. She let go right away, apologized, and asked if he was hurt. Ren smiled and thanked her for stepping in so fast. Then he asked Lillian if she knew the rider. Shaking, she said he was the young master of the Elwyn family. That family made its money by owning every gambling den in Island City. Ren's eyes lit up. If the Elwyn family had money, they might fund his plans, whether they wanted to or not. He told Lillian to take him to one of the gambling dens. She tried to stop him, afraid he'd lose all his money. Ren stayed calm and said the den wouldn't be taking anything from him. Watching him, Lillian started to wonder who this noble young man really was. Before long, Ren reached the gambling den. It was far fancier than anything around it. Guards stood outside, but Ren walked in without pause, already planning to strip this place clean and use the money for his projects. Inside, the den was loud and desperate. Some gamblers begged for loans, sure they could win everything back. Others cheered a lucky round or cried over a bad loss. Ren looked around and realized that as long as this place stayed open, Island City's people would never focus on honest work. Lillian quietly told him their soldiers had already surrounded the den and asked if they should move. Ren told her to wait. He was after a bigger prize. A worker came over with a polite smile and asked what game the young master wanted to play. Pretending to be new to gambling, Ren said he didn't know much and asked for something simple. Thinking he'd found an easy target, the attendant recommended dice. He handed Ren 2 free chips to try his luck, and Ren accepted them like he was pleased. When the game started, Ren casually placed both chips. The staff nearby exchanged smug looks, sure the trap was working. The dice landed on 6 and 6, big. The attendant acted sorry and told Ren he had almost won. Ren played along, acting surprised by how fast it ended. He said it wasn't very fun and that he was hungry, then turned to leave. The attendant stepped in front of him, dropping the polite act. With a sneer, he demanded payment for the chips. Ren frowned and asked when he had agreed to owe anything. The attendant said the chips weren't gifts, they were loans. He claimed each one was worth 100 gold, and with fees and interest, Ren now owed 250 gold coins. Then he smirked and said that if Ren couldn't pay, he could leave his maid behind as collateral. Lillian immediately called out the lie, telling Ren the chips were worth only a silver coin each. Enraged that she exposed him, the attendant shouted for the guards to beat her, but before he could finish, Ren punched him. The man flew back and crashed into a table. Straightening his clothes, Ren said a man like that had no right to talk here. The whole casino exploded into chaos as gamblers lunged for the chips scattered on the floor. Ren watched with a sigh and muttered that none of them were worth much. Then a sharp voice cut through the room, demanding to know who was making trouble. It was the same man Ren had seen riding through the street earlier. Ren smiled. The bigger fish had finally shown up. The room went silent the moment he arrived. He looked around in disgust and ordered his guards to teach the troublemakers a lesson. The guards immediately started beating people nearby. They ignored every plea for mercy. Everyone else just watched, too scared to step in. The Elwyn young master sneered and warned the crowd to behave unless they wanted the same treatment. Clutching Leah's arm, Lillian whispered that this was all her fault. She hated that she had brought Ren and Leah into this. Then she remembered how Ren had personally taken her mother to the hospital, made sure she got treatment, and promised to pay for it. That gave her courage. She stepped forward and declared that she wouldn't let them scam her brother. Her words drew every eye in the room, even if no one dared react. People started whispering, shocked that she would challenge the Elwyn young master. Weo stared at her with cold fury. Lillian refused to back down. She accused him of using the casino to ruin families and said he had no right to bully Ren and Leah, who had only helped people. Weo snapped and rushed at her. Even scared, Lillian didn't move. She stood in front of Ren with her small body as a shield. Before Weo could touch her, Ren caught his arm. Ren then checked Weo with his system. The results were bad. Weak stats, only 5 loyalty points, and a cruel, bloodthirsty nature. Ren saw right away that the Elwyn family could betray him at any time. Weo glared at Ren and accused him of breaking casino rules. Ren let go and calmly replied that he knew the rules well. In this world, the strong decide them. Weo sneered, convinced he was the strongest man in the city, and demanded to know if Ren even knew who he was. Ren didn't care. He said names meant nothing. Only strength mattered. His fist was bigger, so his word was law. Then he clapped his hands. That was the signal for his soldiers to storm the casino. After that, the scene shifted to a banquet held for Ren, where the city's biggest figures gathered with their own secret motives. One guest was Lucas, head of a powerful family. He planned to work with the city lord tonight to teach Ren a lesson. He had wanted to use Weo to get close to Ren first, then take advantage of that connection, so Weo's absence confused him. Annoyed, Lucas realized he couldn't depend on the useless city lord alone and would have to change his plan. As the hall buzzed with whispers, a loud voice announced Ren's arrival. The room instantly went quiet as he entered. His presence alone made everyone straighten up. The head of the Raven family rushed over to introduce himself and offer a gift. Then the head of the Jose family pushed forward, eager to present his daughter and win favor. Ren shut it all down with one cold look and told everyone to be quiet. Once the room settled, he said it was time to begin. He signaled his attendants to bring in a large blueprint. The strange item drew everyone's attention at once. Pointing at it, Ren said it was a dam design he had drawn that afternoon. Skilled builders would refine the details when construction began. The guests whispered in confusion. One even asked if a dam was some kind of fishing tool. Ren called for silence again and had Leah display a map of the region. Once the room quieted, he explained that his survey earlier that day had shown the real cause of Island City's yearly floods, a badly managed canal in the far north. If they built a dam there, they could control the water, use it to water fields in the dry season, and release extra flow during the rains to stop future floods. Listening closely, Lucas had to admit the plan was smart. If the dam worked, the city's food supply would grow a lot, and for the first time, he saw that Ren was truly clever. An older noble then asked what any of this had to do with them. Ren calmly said he needed their money to build the dam, and that answer shocked the room. People immediately started complaining, saying they were too poor to invest. Lucas stayed quiet, thinking Ren might be smart, but he was foolish if he expected these greedy people to pay willingly. But Ren had already seen through them. With a smile, he told them to stop pretending to be poor. He had a way to make them rich. That afternoon, he had taken over a casino and seized nearly 50,000 gold coins. He also hinted there were more casinos in Island City waiting for the same treatment. The room went stiff. Some guests quickly wondered if their share of casino profits was gone. Others prayed it wasn't one of the places they had money in. Then it sank in that the biggest casino belonged to Lord Andrain, which meant Ren had likely picked a fight with someone powerful. Lucas stepped forward, hiding his anger behind a calm face. He accused Ren of breaking the law by shutting down a legal business without approval, and warned that even the Coriol Empire's laws had limits. Others quickly backed him up, saying casinos were lawful businesses and Ren had gone too far. The crowd grew bolder behind Lucas, but Ren stayed calm. He pointed out that when he asked for investment, they claimed to be poor, yet the moment profit was involved, they suddenly cared. He said most of them were tied to those casinos and warned this was their last chance to save face before he stepped in himself. At that, his soldiers moved forward, making his warning feel very real. Lucas answered for the group, saying Grand Duke Sauron would never allow this madness. Others begged Ren to think again and act more carefully. Ren just smiled. Everything was going as planned. In a steady, commanding voice, he said he was happy to talk about the law, then ordered his men to bring in people who could clear things up. The room went quiet. A moment later, 2 men captured at the casino were dragged in. The second Lucas saw them, his stomach dropped. They were always at Weio's side. He started to fear something had happened to his son. The 2 men were tied up and gagged. Still calm, Ren looked at Lucas and asked if he knew them. Keeping his face steady, Lucas said he didn't and asked what Ren meant. Ren smiled and told him not to be so nervous. It wasn't much. These 2 had only tried to assassinate him yesterday. Then looking right at Lucas, Ren added that they claimed to control Island and hinted they had a strong backer. Lucas's face darkened. Sweat began to form, though he tried not to show it. Ren ordered the soldiers to untie them so the guests could get a better look and see if anyone recognized them. The nobles traded uneasy looks. Many knew at once they were Weio's attendants. A chill spread through the room as everyone understood what that meant. Lucas saw the danger immediately and acted at once. He snatched up a dagger from the table and rushed the 2 men, shouting that lowborn trash had dared attack the Duke's son. Then he killed them both on the spot. Blood spread across the floor and the room turned dead silent. The nobles stared in horror, too scared to move. Standing over the bodies, Lucas turned to Ren with fake shame. He apologized again and again, claiming he acted in anger after hearing about the assassination attempt and begged forgiveness. Ren, who had expected this, smiled and praised Lucas for his strong sense of justice. Hiding his relief, Lucas thanked him and said he only did what had to be done. But Ren wasn't done. Calmly, he ordered his men to bring in the real mastermind and see if anyone else in the room was as righteous as Lucas. That made Lucas tense up at once. Then his son Weio was dragged in. Not understanding the situation, Weio immediately yelled at the soldiers to untie him. He bragged about his father's power and threatened everyone there. The moment Lucas saw him, his confidence broke. Now he knew why Weio had never shown up to the banquet. When Weio noticed his 2 attendants lying dead on the floor, he exploded with rage. He cursed Ren and promised to torture him once he got free. Ren only laughed, dryly noting that Weio didn't just want him dead, he wanted him to suffer too. Weio kept ranting, boasting that no one in Azlon dared oppose him and that Ren was as good as dead. Ren then looked at Lucas and asked if he agreed with his son. Still not knowing who Ren was, Weio laughed and mocked him again. He was just about to expose Lucas's identity when his father cut him off. Desperate now, Lucas called him a foolish son and ordered him to kneel before Ren. When Weio hesitated, Lucas shoved him down. Father and son ended up kneeling together as Lucas begged Ren for mercy. He even offered all his wealth if Ren would spare Weio. Only then did Weio understand. He remembered his father's order to get close to the Duke's son, and fear filled his eyes as Ren's identity finally clicked. Stammering, Weio apologized and swore he would never be that reckless again. Ren stayed cold and told Weio his soldiers, and power should have made his identity obvious. Lucas quickly joined in, swearing the Elwyn family would serve Ren from now on, and offering to hand over all their illegal wealth. Ren said he would accept that offer. If Lucas obeyed, his family would be left unharmed. Relieved, Lucas thanked him at once. But when he looked toward the city lord, he realized his own power had just shrunk. Knowing he had no better option, Lucas leaned in and whispered about a plot against the Duke. He said Lord Eldry had been working with outside enemies to betray the city. The room was stunned, and every eye turned to Eldry, who froze in fear. Lucas tried to say more, but Ren cut him off. He accused Lucas of slandering Eldry and said he had already shown enough mercy. Then Ren ordered the guards to drag Lucas and Weo away for execution. Lucas was horrified, unable to understand why Ren had suddenly turned on him. Eldry, meanwhile, felt relieved and stepped forward to swear loyalty. He praised Ren's wisdom and promised full support. Ren smiled and told Eldry he trusted him completely. But in secret, Ren used his system to inspect Eldry. Along with his normal stats, he found the trait greed and saw his loyalty was only 15. Ren decided Eldry would die too, but for now, his resources were still useful. After the banquet, Ren worked late into the night. The nobles had handed over more than 100,000 gold coins, about 2 years of Aisland's taxes, but he still wasn't satisfied. While he worked, Leia came in with tea, set it down, and noticed his sour expression. Taking the cup, Ren bitterly asked if she understood just how rich those nobles really were. Leia ignored that and brought up the real issue. What was he going to do about what Lucas revealed at the party? If City Lord Eldry truly meant to betray them, Ren was in serious danger. Ren told her to stay calm. He admitted he was sure Eldry was a traitor, but said it still wasn't time to move against him. When Leia asked why, Ren stood and stretched, explaining that Eldry's whole power network in Aisland was still unclear. Moving too soon would only create chaos. For now, it was better to let Eldry think he was just a clueless young lord. The next morning, Eldry went to the Mages Guild to meet Guildmaster Malcolm. He handed Malcolm a paper, and after reading it, the Guildmaster's face twisted with anger. Malcolm slammed it down and called it ridiculous. Eldry calmly told him not to overreact, brushing Ren off as a young noble trying too hard to impress Grand Duke Sauron. But Malcolm wasn't calming down. He snapped that even the Grand Duke treated the Mages Guild with respect. Inside, Eldry was pleased. He believed Ren had just given him the perfect chance to win the guild over. As Malcolm stormed off with the paper, swearing to confront Ren, Eldry quietly celebrated, sure Ren would soon be standing alone. At the same time, Ren was in his study drawing plans for a new water project. The work reminded him of the struggles from his past life. Leia came in and told him an unexpected guest had arrived. Guildmaster Malcolm wanted to see him right away. Surprised, Ren headed straight to the parlor. The second he walked in, Malcolm exploded in anger. He slammed a recruitment notice on the table and accused Ren of insulting the Mages Guild. Confused, Ren asked what he meant. Malcolm pointed to the notice, which said Ren's project would not hire mages, the disabled, or the elderly, and demanded an explanation. Ren looked it over and calmly said it was for the dam project. He didn't see how it insulted the guild. Malcolm disagreed, saying excluding mages was an open insult to the guild and everyone in it. Ren was genuinely surprised that mages were even competing for hard labor jobs. Still angry, Malcolm warned that if Ren couldn't give a good reason, every mage in the guild would refuse to serve him. Ren frowned and had the system check Malcolm's stats. It showed Malcolm's loyalty at 82, with an inquisitive and straightforward personality. That told Ren one thing: Malcolm had been played. So Ren smiled and calmly laid out his reasons in 3 points. First, mages had limited mana, so they could only do a little work each day and weren't fit for a huge project. Second, one mage cost as much as 10 regular workers. Third, as a noble, Ren believed he should help ordinary people first, especially those without the guild's backing. Malcolm still didn't buy it. He argued that magic stood above all else, and people without it should stay beneath mages. Ren was annoyed, though he admitted that was how the world worked. But he said he meant to change that, starting in Isilin, and prove mages were still just people. Deeply offended, Malcolm gave him a choice: take it back or deal with the Mage Guild's anger. Ren's face went cold, and he told Malcolm to mind his tone. Leah stepped in and pressed a knife to Malcolm's throat, her gaze full of warning. Malcolm went stiff as Ren calmly reminded him that by law, a noble's maid could execute someone for disrespect. He even suggested testing that law with a small cut and seeing how the court ruled. Shaking, Malcolm quickly apologized and begged to be forgiven. Since Malcolm's loyalty hadn't dropped, Ren realized this came from ignorance, not bad intent. Not wanting to push things further, he told Leah to see Malcolm out. Malcolm thanked him and hurried off. Then the system announced Ren had finished a beginner task by using investigation on 10 people. He got a reward, and a new mission appeared: train 5 high-stat characters. Satisfied, Ren decided to check the rewards later. Outside the estate, Eldry was waiting for Malcolm. As soon as he saw him, he rushed over and asked how the meeting went. Still embarrassed, Malcolm said Ren wouldn't listen and had him thrown out. Frustrated but quick to adapt, Eldry said he had another idea. This one, he claimed, would force Ren to change his mind and respect the Mage Guild. Since the first plan failed, Eldry told Malcolm to stir up the townspeople and make them refuse Ren's jobs, hoping Ren would have no choice but to ask the guild for help. Malcolm shot that down at once, saying Ren's work terms were too good for people to reject. Eldry then suggested another route: make Ren think the workers were lazy and useless, so he'd lose faith in commoners. Malcolm brushed it off. He said his issue was only Ren refusing to hire mages, not anything against regular people, and he didn't want to go that far. Eldry kept pushing, claiming the commoners suffered because they were lazy. If the land failed to grow crops, he said, why didn't they just go hunt? People that idle, he insisted, would never truly work hard for Ren. In the end, Malcolm reluctantly agreed to try it. Meanwhile, Ren's hiring notice went up in the town square and quickly drew a crowd. People read that the new lord was building something and needed workers. Then they saw the terms 9 to 5, 3 meals a day, and 10 coins daily, and were stunned. A young man questioned why any lord would be this generous. Others agreed, suspecting a trick. Nobles had fooled them before, and some feared the job might even cost them their lives. Then Lillian stepped forward, speaking with confidence. She defended Ren, saying he truly meant to make life better for everyone. The crowd laughed at her and mocked her for trusting a noble. Even Lillian's father joined in, saying Ren must have charmed her. Ignoring them all, Lillian declared she would sign up for the dam project. The recruiter stayed calm and told her father he could work on the dam, but Lillian could not. Confused, she demanded to know why when she was healthy and able to work. He explained that Ren had banned anyone under 18 from working. Breaking that rule without Ren's permission, he added, would bring heavy punishment. He handed her father a form and repeated the offer. 3 meals, 8 hours of work, and 10 coins a day. If he agreed, he could start tomorrow. A little disappointed, Lillian still told her father to work hard and not slack off. Smiling, he patted her head. He promised to stop gambling and not let Ren down. He also told Lillian to stay home the next day and care for her sick mother, who couldn't handle hard labor. Before they left, the recruiter called them back. Lillian's father stopped and asked what was wrong. The recruiter said he had heard that his wife was seriously ill. Lillian's father quickly confirmed she was too sick to work. The recruiter kindly said that wasn't the issue. Ren had arranged dorms for workers' families during the project. Seeing his confusion, he explained these were temporary homes, and families could return to their own houses once the dam was done. Overcome, Lillian's father dropped to his knees and thanked him. The recruiter quickly helped him up, said that wasn't needed, and offered to show them the rooms so they could pick one. The people watching were shocked. Once they realized Ren's promises were real, they rushed to sign up too. The square turned chaotic as everyone pushed forward to register. Back in his office, Ren checked the system updates. A message popped up. He had received a lithium battery blueprint from the newbie gift pack. Instead of being happy, Ren got irritated. He muttered that a battery was useless without a generator. Was the system expecting him to call down lightning? After complaining for a bit, he settled down and thought it through. His mind turned to the mission to train 5 people with high stats, but he had no clue where to find them. He first thought of Leah, but the system showed she'd already hit her limit and couldn't grow further. After thinking it over, Ren decided his best option was to look for talented people in Island City. As he considered that, someone knocked. Leah said Lillian was here to see him, and Ren let her in. Lillian entered looking worried and quickly said something was wrong at the construction site. The workers were too tired to work. Caught off guard, Ren asked her to explain. Lillian told him what she had seen. She had gone to check on her father and found that none of the workers had the energy to do their jobs. At first she thought they were just lazy, but her father said everyone had woken up unusually exhausted, and it wasn't just him. The whole crew felt the same way. Lillian tried to fire them up by reminding them how well Lord Ren treated them, but it didn't help. The workers insisted they weren't faking it. Some thought their bodies just weren't used to labor anymore, and others wanted a day off to recover. Lillian rejected that and said there was no such sickness. They were just being lazy. When she couldn't change their minds, she came straight to Ren. After hearing her out, he immediately went to the site. Once there, he saw their weakness for himself. He used the system to inspect them. Everything looked normal at first, except for one major problem. Every worker was under a curse. Ren turned to Lillian and explained it calmly. They're not sick, they're cursed. Realizing that, Ren looked over the site and thought about what to do next. He chose to test his new geological survey skill. He had planned to save it for the dam, but now he needed answers fast. The skill could scan the area's minerals, water flow, and land shape within a set range. Ren activated it and surveyed everything within 10 kilometers. The results filled his mind. There was no oil or metal nearby, but one strange thing stood out. Following that clue, he asked Lillian's father to help dig at the marked spot. The man agreed right away, eager to work hard for Ren. About a meter down, they found a strange black stone. Ren crouched to inspect it. Leah was shocked that he had noticed the faint magic coming from it, something even she had missed. Ren told them to carefully remove the crystal and seal it in a box. Then he asked Leah how cursed people were usually treated. Caught off guard, she said curses were normally handled by church priests or high-ranking mages from the Mage Association. Ren frowned, suspecting the Mage Association was involved. He decided to take Lillian and her father to the local church. Worried, Lillian asked if her father was really cursed. Ren reassured her and promised whoever did this would pay. They hurried to the church where a beautiful priestess welcomed them. She greeted Ren with a calm, polite smile. Always careful, Ren checked her loyalty with the system before asking for help. It showed a loyalty of 95. She was an elf, and though she looked about 24, she was actually around 257 years old. Ren was surprised she wasn't human, but her high loyalty put him at ease. She introduced herself as Ari, the church's holy maiden, then asked why they had come. Ren pointed to Lillian's father and said he seemed cursed, asking if she could treat him. Ari nodded and began to examine him. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again, now glowing gold. After checking him, she confirmed the curse and started healing him. She summoned a glowing orb and sent it into the man's body, pushing out the dark energy. The man felt better right away. He thanked Ren and said he could go back to work at once. Ren smiled and told him to rest first, just to be sure the curse was fully gone. Then he took out the box with the black crystal and asked Eri what she thought of it. After looking it over, Eri said it was a magic crystal packed with energy often used for curses. But she added that this one was more like a mean prank. It caused heavy fatigue, not real damage. That still bothered Ren, so he asked how hard it was to make something like this. Eri said a strong mage could make one a day without much trouble and scatter them around the site. Ren's face hardened as he understood this was done on purpose. Eri said she knew about his project and praised it for lowering the number of people needing help from the church. Now sure who was behind it, Ren decided to move. He asked if she could remove the curse from the whole construction site. Eri said no. At best they could remove the crystals one by one each day, which would only delay the work. Ren let out a sigh, knowing he had to stop the source. Eri mentioned someone who might help, though she warned the woman was odd. She gave him an address, and Ren went to check it out. Ren and Leah arrived at a large mansion Eri said belonged to Selena, the former head of the Mage Association. Ren walked up and knocked without hesitation. Suddenly, Leah felt danger and yanked Ren aside. A blast erupted from the upper floor, sending smoke and debris flying. Startled, Ren asked what in the world was going on. Out of the smoke came a gorgeous woman, sounding furious. She cursed her failed experiment and swore she'd make it work, even if she blew up all of Island City. Inside, Ren explained the curse problem and asked Selena for help. She flatly refused, saying she was busy working on a new magic tool and had no time for him. Interested, Ren asked if she meant something like a magic wand. Selena laughed at him and mocked how little he knew. Leah stepped in at once, coldly warning Selena to mind how she spoke to young Master Ren. Annoyed, Selena looked Leah over and noted her strong magic. With a sly grin, she said Leah should stay and be her assistant. In return, she'd help Ren after her research was done, while lightning sparked around her. Leah didn't flinch and offered to teach Selena some manners. As things got tense, Ren stepped between them and told Leah to calm down. They came for help, not a fight. Looking at the messy table, Ren asked if Selena had made all those items and whether they were magic tools. Selena proudly said yes, though everything there was a failure. She explained she was trying to build a device that could store the lightning magic inside her body. Ren was stunned. To him, it sounded like storing electricity. Selena agreed. She said the earlier blast happened because her devices couldn't handle her power, then told him to leave so she could rest and keep researching. Ren stopped and thought for a moment before making an offer. He told Selena that if he could help build the device, she had to help him deal with the Mages Guild. Selena brushed him off, saying her research was far beyond someone like him. Still calm, Ren said he meant it and promised to help if she'd support him afterward. Curious despite herself, Selena finally agreed on one condition. If he succeeded, she'd handle Malcolm and make the guild obey his orders. If he failed, she'd punish him. Ren got right to work, telling Selena to gather materials. Using a system blueprint, he guided her in making a lithium battery pack with 8 large batteries connected together. Even so, Ren was nervous. They had no real power source to test it, so they had to use Selena's magic instead. Selena built it as instructed, though she clearly doubted it would work. She warned that most materials couldn't handle her power and said it might just explode. Ren handed her the wires and stayed calm. He said the pack held about 185 watt-hours and told her to pour her magic into it. Reluctantly, Selena began. To her surprise, the device took in her power with no problem. She pushed harder, but it still stayed stable. Stunned, Selena demanded to know why it hadn't exploded. Ren smirked and teased that maybe her magic wasn't as great as she thought. Angry, Selena released her full power, yet the battery pack still held without breaking. She was speechless, both at how much power it stored and how easily Ren had made it. Satisfied, Ren stepped up to check the charge. It was at 87%. Inside, he was amazed. Selena had nearly filled the whole pack. Feeling more confident, Ren turned to her and said he planned to change the Mages Guild. He called the mages possible power banks and laid out how he wanted to use their magic. Interested now, Selena asked if Ren himself could use lightning magic. Ren didn't deny it. Instead, he said he could make everyone in Island City able to use magic. Selena doubted that, saying magic wasn't something just anyone could learn. But Ren stayed calm and hinted he had an even more powerful magic device than the battery pack. If she helped him, he'd show her a world where magic was open to everyone. Confused but curious, Selena decided to keep working with him. The next day at the Mages Guild, Malcolm was casually reading a book, sure Ren would soon come begging. That calm shattered when Selena suddenly walked in. Malcolm froze. The former guild president was the last person he expected. He greeted her nervously and asked why she had come. Selena snapped back in anger, asking how he dared challenge the Grand Duke's household and whether he was trying to start a rebellion. Shaken, Malcolm quickly denied it and swore he would never think of such a thing. Selena didn't buy it. She grabbed him by the collar and demanded he confess what he did at Ren's site. Trembling, Malcolm gave in. He admitted he had gathered the guild mages, stirred them up by saying young Master Ren had insulted them, then ordered them to make cursed crystals and teleport them under the construction site. The plan was to make the workers tired so Ren would think they were lazy. He wanted to force Ren to apologize and work more closely with the guild. Selena stared at him in disbelief and called him an idiot, saying he'd been used. When Malcolm asked who had used him, Selena ignored that and ordered him to call back every mage involved at once. Malcolm hurried off to obey. After he left, Selena used a talisman to contact Ren. She told him the problem with the mages guild was settled. Ren thanked her through the talisman. Curious, Selena asked if he wanted help getting rid of Eldry and offered to make him vanish. Ren quickly refused. He said Eldry wasn't the real problem and he still needed him to draw out a bigger enemy. Selena accepted that and agreed not to interfere. Then her tone turned eager as she brought up Ren's new inventions. She asked when they'd be ready and told him to call her when he started. Ren said he would, but first the guild mages needed to finish charging the battery clusters. The next day at the city lord's residence, Eldry met a shadowy man. Nervous, Eldry reported that Ren had already taken over the mages guild and asked what to do. The man stayed calm, saying the guild wasn't a real threat except for Selena. He told Eldry to focus on Ren's dam. If it succeeded, Island's people could recover, and that couldn't be allowed. Eldry said he had already set traps and had another plan too. He meant to pressure the nobles controlling food to raise prices and weaken Ren's efforts. When the shadowy man questioned the nobles' loyalty, Eldry said they might betray him, but never their own profits. Flipping a gold coin with a smug grin, Eldry said Ren's money wouldn't last until the dam was finished. The coin hit the table, and the shadowy man vanished. In the busy market, Lillian tried to buy supplies for the work site, but a shopkeeper rudely chased her off, saying she should leave if she couldn't pay. Upset, Lillian pointed out the crazy jump in price. Yesterday, 2 bags of grain cost 1 gold coin, now 1 bag cost 2. The shopkeeper just shrugged and said he could charge whatever he wanted. Then he mocked her for being poor and even lifted his hand like he might hit her. That drew a crowd, and many people were angry at what he was doing. Still focused on Ren's job, Lillian accused the merchants of price gouging and warned them not to test Ren's patience. The shopkeeper only sneered. He claimed his business was legal and said Ren had no right to step in, which made the crowd even more upset. At the church, Ari was just as furious about the soaring prices. She said food had tripled in only 3 days, and the grain she had wasn't enough to get everyone through winter. She handed Era a pouch of coins and told her to buy whatever food she could. They'd deal with the rest later. Era hesitated, shocked by how much money it was, and said bribing guards usually cost far less. Ari sighed and told her to just do as she said. Before Era could move, Leah suddenly appeared, snatched the pouch, and handed it to Ren. Calm but firm, Ren predlogial they worked together on a bigger plan, one that would fix the real problem and stop the merchants from taking advantage of everyone. Ari eyed him warily and asked what kind of cooperation he meant. Ren smiled and told her to relax, then casually revealed that he knew she was an elf. Even though that alarmed her, Ari stayed calm and denied it, saying no elf would live in a human city. Ren tossed the money pouch back and assured her he meant no harm to elves. Ari ignored that and asked again what plan he had. Pointing to the food sacks nearby, Ren said he wanted to work with her to solve the city's food crisis. Ari respected his resolve, but she didn't think he could fix something this deep. When she said so, Ren asked why. Ari explained that Itzland's food supply was controlled by 4 powerful families that had ruled the trade for over 100 years. They controlled the prices, and no one could shake them. She reminded him that he had scared some of them at the banquet, but they were too sly to stay beaten for long. Ren cut in, surprised by how much she knew. Ari admitted she'd lived in Itzland for more than 120 years, so she knew the city well. She added that if Ren had wiped out the Elwyn family at the banquet, maybe things could have been fixed, but now that chance was gone. Ari went on to say that war and disasters had already made food scarce, and if prices stayed this high, her tribe might not survive the winter. Ren stopped her there and promised that within 2 weeks, food prices in Island would fall even below what they were before. At Augustus Ken's mansion, head of the Klein family, a celebration was underway. Augustus thanked Eldry for his help, saying their partnership had brought in huge profits. The others joined in, raising their glasses to Augustus and their success. The whole room was in high spirits, sure their plan was working perfectly. Then a servant came in and announced that Ren had invited them to a banquet at his mansion. One man, startled by the message, nervously wondered if Ren meant to punish them. He turned to Augustus and asked what they should do. Augustus stayed calm. He told them they were safe because their grain business was legal and protected by the system they had built. As long as they didn't openly challenge Ren, they had nothing to fear. He reminded them that the 4 families together were strong enough that not even the king could control food prices. That eased their nerves, and they agreed they were secure. Augustus said if Ren pushed them, they could pretend to cooperate by lowering prices a tiny bit, maybe 5 copper coins. But he warned that anyone who betrayed them would pay for it. With everyone settled, Augustus told them to get ready for the banquet. Though confused when he told them to wear old, torn clothes, they followed his lead. At Ren's mansion, a servant told him Augustus and the others had arrived. Ren told the servant to bring them in and have the kitchen start serving. When Augustus and the others came in, Ren immediately saw they were pretending to be poor. Their rich clothes were gone, replaced with rags, and Ren found the act almost laughable. Still, he greeted them with fake surprise and remarked how odd it was to see the men controlling Elan's food supply looking so broke. Augustus quickly praised Ren's projects and claimed they also wanted to help the people. Another man added that under Augustus, they had donated money and sold grain as cheaply as possible, even at a loss. Watching their shameless lies, Leah felt only disgust. Ren played along, thanking them and saying he was touched by their support. He said he had invited them to talk about the grain trade, but Augustus cut him off, claiming they already understood Ren's money troubles. He insisted that even at 2 gold coins a sack, they were already losing money, and the others backed him up. Ren smiled and said that starting tomorrow, grain in Island should be sold for 4 gold coins a sack. The nobles were stunned, and Augustus asked if Ren really meant to raise the price. Ren calmly confirmed it and added that he would also take a 30% commission from every sale, which left Augustus even more confused. He asked if he had heard wrong. Ren simply reminded him about the 30% cut. At that, Augustus and the others traded excited looks. They had thought Ren was just a naive young lord. Now they saw him as a businessman like them. With Ren on their side, they figured their profits would only grow. Some even regretted not joining him sooner. Still, Augustus knew they needed to be careful. Raising prices that high without paperwork could spark chaos and hurt them too. So he politely thanked Ren and asked when the official order would be announced. Ready for that, Ren had Leah give him a document. He cheerfully said he had already written it, stamped it with his family seal, and would post it after the meal. As they kept talking, Ren reminded the nobles that from now on, they would follow his lead. And remember what happened to the Elwyn family. Augustus quickly promised they wouldn't let him down. After the banquet, the nobles met again at Augustus's home. Ren's move had confused them, and they argued over whether to tell Eldry. Some thought it was strange that Ren wanted higher prices instead of lower ones, and guessed it was just greed. Augustus brushed that off and called it a golden chance. If too many people found out, he warned, their profits would drop. He said Ren was just a kid using benefits to pull them in, so they should keep the plan secret. A huge fortune was right in front of them. Even so, one careful noble admitted he was uneasy. In all his years, he had never seen a chance this profitable, and that made him suspicious. Still, he bowed deeply and said he would follow Augustus. The others did the same and pledged loyalty. Pleased, Augustus laughed and said they would move as one from now on. He told them to buy up all the grain from the smaller merchants before the notice went up so they could control the market. Meanwhile, unexpected visitors arrived at Ren's estate. Scientist Era stormed in, furious. She accused Ren of siding with the crooked merchants and demanded to know why he had let grain prices rise after promising to lower them. She said she wouldn't sit back while the elves were being used like this. Lillian quickly tried to calm her, saying Ren really did plan to bring prices down and asking her to trust him, but Era snapped that Ren had already become the merchant's partner. Even so, Lillian stood by Ren and begged Era to believe in his plan. After a tense pause, Era looked at Ren and quietly asked if he really meant to raise food prices. Ren smiled but didn't explain everything. He only assured her that prices would fall soon, at worst, within 2 weeks. Era wasn't convinced. After more than 200 years of life, she had never seen food prices drop after such a huge increase. Ren turned serious and asked her this. If he held a knife to the nobles' throats, how much would they lower the price? 1 coin? 10? Era couldn't answer, but she still argued that 4 gold coins a sack was outrageous. People were already struggling when it was only 2. Ren calmly said it didn't matter whether grain cost 2 gold coins or 4, the people would starve either way. The only thing that changed was when it happened. Just cutting the price a little wouldn't matter. Ren wasn't trying to be kind, he wanted to crush the merchants and wipe out their wealth. 7 days went by, and Ren spent them teaching Selena how lithium batteries are made and how they work. Selena was hooked by how complex it was and stayed fully focused on the lesson, until Leah suddenly came in and said Saintess Era was back again. Era had been visiting a lot lately, making Ren joke that she had too much free time. Selena then asked why he had raised food prices on purpose. By now, grain in the city was close to 7 gold per sack. Ren was surprised the price had climbed so fast, but before he could answer, Era rushed into the room and scolded him at once. She said even some nobles couldn't afford food now, and demanded to know if he understood how bad things had gotten. Ren stayed calm and asked Leah how long it had been since the price hike. Leah answered right away. It had been 7 days. Ren smiled. It was time to deal with the merchants. Still upset, Era told him to stop being vague and explain, warning that the elf tribe might cut ties with him if he didn't. Ren said he had kept the full plan secret so the nobles wouldn't get suspicious. But now that everything was set, he could explain it. He reminded her that the 4 gold minimum price had been active for 7 days, then asked what she thought Ailing City was missing most right now. After thinking a moment, she said the city didn't seem short on anything. Ren gave a small smile and said the city was missing merchants who sold grain. Era froze as it started to click. Ren went on, saying greed was the easiest weakness to use. The crazy grain prices had pulled in merchants from nearby towns like moths to a flame, all hoping to cash in. Without realizing it, they had turned Iceland into the most food-filled city in the empire. Everyone rushing in to sell at huge prices created a cycle they couldn't control. Ren said that by day's end, the 4 noble houses controlling the grain trade would be finished. He pulled out a paper and told Era to post the notice on every main street and alley. It said the Holy Maiden disapproved of Ren's method and would sell the church's grain for just 1 gold coin per sack. Era immediately doubted him and asked why he was handing her such great publicity. Ren smirked and said it was because he had no food to sell. Era frowned, confused. She said she barely had enough grain for her people through winter. Ren said that was exactly why she needed to sell. She panicked and refused. There was no way she'd risk her people's food. Selena laughed and told her she was being naive. If she really wanted to protect her people, she needed to trust Ren, or she'd take heavy losses. Era still hesitated. The elves didn't care about money, only food. Ren calmly told her to trust him and do as he said. She wouldn't lose anything. Her food supply would only grow. Then he told Selena and the Mage Guild to seal the city so no one could leave. Selena agreed. She wouldn't let even a rat get out. After Era and Selena left, Leah stayed quiet, worry clear on her face. Ren noticed and asked what was wrong. She said she was afraid things might not work as planned. What if the merchants waited a few days and the church ran out of grain? Ren laughed and reassured her. There were two kinds of plans, hidden schemes and open ones. Hidden plans could be exposed, but open plans were impossible to avoid. The merchants had already bet everything because of their greed. The moment they heard prices were falling, they'd rush to dump their grain before taking huge losses. If they waited, they'd be ruined. Meanwhile, Augustus's estate fell into panic. One noble told Augustus the church had announced grain sales at 1 gold coin per sack to help the people. Another said they had badly underestimated the church's supply. They had bought grain at 2 gold per sack, so if the church flooded the market, they'd lose badly. Augustus stayed calm. He asked how much grain one church could really have. At most, enough for a few days. His answer was simple. Send men into the church to buy as much cheap grain as possible. The next day, a huge crowd gathered outside the church to buy food. At the entrance, Era tried to calm everyone. She said there was plenty of grain for all, and even claimed the Holy Pope had sent 100,000 sacks, with more on the way. Some people didn't believe her and thought it was a lie. The crowd started pushing forward, but then soldiers arrived and the restless crowd went silent. One soldier stepped up and formally confirmed the grain really came from the Holy Pope, with more arriving regularly. Era forced an awkward nod, but inside she was in panic. If the Holy Pope found out, she'd be in serious trouble. The citizens didn't care about that. They cheered in relief. They had food and were saved. The merchants watching turned pale. One muttered that the church had ruined everything. Another quickly figured his costs. 60 silver per sack, 95 after transport and other fees. To avoid losing everything, he had no choice but to sell. He shouted that his grain was 95 silver coins per sack, and the crowd rushed over. Other sellers saw it and joined the price war, cutting lower and lower. Grain prices in Aislinn City crashed. Leah watched in shock. Everything was happening just as Ren had said. She turned to him, excited, and said if grain kept falling, construction would stay on schedule. Ren smirked, but Leah was still aiming too low. 50 silver a sack? She didn't understand how desperate those merchants would get. He leaned back, fully relaxed. Once Augustus and the others started dumping their stock, grain wouldn't just be cheap, it would be worthless. Leah was stunned. Did he really think Augustus and his allies would dump their grain too? They had paid 2 gold per sack, maybe more, and at the banquet they looked so united. Surely they wouldn't betray each other that fast. Ren laughed at that idea. United? That gave them way too much credit. When money was on the line, greed always won. He said grain prices didn't matter anymore. It was time for the last part of his plan with the Saintess, and he told Leah it was time to go. At Augustus's mansion, panic exploded. A butler rushed in and said the outside merchants had gone crazy. They kept cutting prices, and grain was already down to 75 silver per sack. Lord Roland shot up, furious. That couldn't be possible. They controlled all the grain in the city. How were outside merchants selling any at all? The butler, shaking, said it was true. Augustus frowned, then suddenly understood. With bitter respect, he said Ren had played them all. The other nobles stared at him, confused. Augustus explained. Ren first spread word that grain prices in Iceland were soaring, starting a rush from nearby merchants. Driven by greed, they poured into the city with more food than Augustus and the others ever expected. Then Ren used the church's name to crash the market, forcing those merchants to panic sell before taking huge losses. The result was a full market collapse, with grain flooding the city. Roland went pale, covered in cold sweat. Ren had used ruthless, dirty methods, but Augustus still had one last gamble. He said the city only had enough grain for a few months. If they held their stock until shortages returned, they could sell high again. To survive, they had to stay united. If even one man started selling, they were all finished. Roland agreed at once, saying they had to hold on. He declared he was going home to lock down his grain and make sure none was sold. Then he ran for the door. As soon as he was gone, the others traded looks. Roland clearly planned to sell first, so why should they wait? 2 more nobles quickly left too, pretending loyalty while planning the same thing. Augustus watched them go and clenched his fists. His butler nervously asked if they should protect their grain too. Augustus kicked him aside and snapped that if they didn't sell now, the other traders would undercut them and leave them with worthless stock. He gave the order at once. Sell everything. Every last sack. Back at the church, Ren came to see the Saintess and casually asked if the elves had enough grain now. Ren asked if the elves now had enough grain for winter. The Saintess still couldn't believe it. The more they sold, the more grain they seemed to gain. Ren smirked and said it was simple. Buy cheap, sell high. Each deal was making them huge profits. Then Lillian rushed in with more news. The price had dropped again. Now 1 gold coin could buy 3 sacks of grain. Ren gave the Saintess a smug look. He told her to wait, and if she bought now, she'd get far more food than before. With that settled, he said it was time to talk about their real deal. The saintess hesitated and asked what he wanted from the elves. Ren held out his hand, face unreadable. Everything. He explained that he wanted to work together in every part of trade. Food, clothes, housing, transport, land, all of it. The saintess got flustered. Something this big was beyond her authority. He'd need to speak with the elven queen herself. Ren agreed and handed her a letter, asking her to set up the meeting. After she left, he thought about his next steps. The grain crisis had taught Iceland's nobles a harsh lesson. They wouldn't challenge him anytime soon. The Mage Guild was already in his hands, and the church would follow soon. That left Eldrick, the city lord. He still controlled two key things, the army and taxes. If Ren took the military, Eldrick would have nothing left. He just needed a way in. Before he could think more, Leah walked up and interrupted him. She softly told him to rest since he'd been working without a break. Ren brushed it off, saying he wasn't that tired. Then a sudden commotion broke out. An angry man stormed into the church, shouting that corrupt soldiers were abusing the Grand Duke's name. He cursed the heavens and asked why the divine hadn't punished them. The saintess calmly asked what happened. The man said he had come to Iceland for business and accepted the risk of profit or loss. But on his way back, soldiers robbed him and took all his money. Interested, Ren stepped in and asked him to explain. Still furious, the merchant snapped back, asking who he was. Ren just smiled. Someone very interested in business. Ren, Leah, and Lillian disguised themselves as merchants and joined a caravan leaving the city. At the gate, a guard stopped them and demanded to know where they came from and what they were carrying. Lillian kept calm and said she was from Iceland, taking goods bought in the city to trade with the elven tribe. The guard sneered and ordered a search at once. The soldiers ripped off the covers and smashed open the barrels with their spears. Lillian protested, asking how she was supposed to move her goods if they kept destroying them. A soldier then reported the carts were empty. The officer didn't care and said they still had to pay a toll. Lillian's anger rose. They had already ruined her cargo, and now they wanted money too. The guard smirked and told her to pay or go back. Before she could argue more, Ren, hidden in the cart, told her to just pay. She forced herself to hand over 1 silver coin, but the guard wasn't done. Grinning, he claimed that under Lord Ren's orders, the toll had gone up to 5 silver coins. Leah snapped that the fee was worth more than all the goods they carried. The guard didn't care. Pay or move aside. Grinding her teeth, Lillian handed over the coins. Inside, she burned with rage. Someone was using Ren's name to rob people, and she couldn't wait to see them punished. The soldiers took the money and let them pass. Once outside the city, a nearby merchant cursed young Lord Ren for raising the toll so much. Still in disguise, Ren looked over, and the merchant beside him quickly pushed back, saying he should watch his mouth. Lord Ren had helped Iceland, and he wouldn't allow anyone to insult him. Ren found it amusing. The guard had openly blamed Ren, yet this man still defended him. The merchant said Ren had lowered grain prices and helped the people, even though it cost him dearly. It was the first time he'd seen a noble truly care. If he ever met Ren, he said, he'd gladly risk his life for him. Ren stayed calm and casually brought up rumors about the Grand Lord's youngest son killing someone at a banquet and forcing townspeople to dig for something. The merchant brushed it off. That was the Eldwin family, and they got what they deserved. Ren acted curious and asked what else people knew about them. Lowering his voice, the merchant said every trader in Iceland knew the truth. The Eldwin family's real money didn't come from gambling houses. They were involved in human trafficking. Ren's hands tightened. Human trafficking. He cursed inwardly. He already lacked manpower, and these scum were running a slave trade behind the scenes. If he wanted to secure his land, he needed control of the border troops. If trouble broke out inside, outside enemies could take advantage fast. Before he could think further, Lillian shouted from outside the cart. Another toll. The border guards had stopped them and wanted more money. Lillian argued that they'd already paid leaving Aislinn, so why pay again? The guards mocked her and said the city toll was separate from the border toll. Lillian called it what it was, robbery. The guards smirked and named the new fee, 1 gold coin. Lillian flared up again, but Ren cut in, calm as ever, and told her to pay. She handed over the gold, but the guards still weren't satisfied. They ordered everyone out of the cart. This was a border post, they said, and everyone entering or leaving had to be inspected. Ren stepped down and fixed the guard with a sharp stare. If they wanted an inspection, then do it. The guards tensed, sweat forming on one man's face. Then his eyes shifted to the merchant behind Ren, and he sneered, calling him an old fool for daring to come back. Ren noticed and looked to the merchant. Trist, clearly uneasy, admitted these border soldiers were once bandits tied to the Eldwin family. They used to kidnap people and traffic them, and now they hid behind official posts to collect illegal tolls. The soldiers scoffed and brought up an old debt, saying Trist hadn't paid enough last time and now owed more. Without waiting, he slapped Trist hard across the face. Trist stumbled and insisted he had already paid in full. The soldier didn't care. He pointed his weapon and demanded more money. This wasn't about tolls anymore. They recognized Trist and saw a chance to squeeze him harder. For him, the price jumped to 5 gold coins. Ren watched quietly, then asked one simple question. If tolls here were this high, why was Aislinn still bringing in so little money? The soldier ignored the question, but then he noticed Leia and his attitude changed. A grin spread across his face as he stepped toward her. Trying to calm things down, Trist quickly pulled out a pouch and offered 5 gold coins, hoping that would end it. The soldier took the pouch with a smug look and tossed it to one of his men. But instead of stopping, he reached toward Leia, wanting more than money. Before he could touch her, Ren stepped in. Coldly, he decided the man was beyond saving. He had thought about putting these people to work, but they were rotten to the core. The soldier flew into a rage and drove his spear at Ren. Leia moved before it could hit. In an instant, the soldier dropped dead. The others recoiled in fear. Panic swept through them, and some threw down their weapons and ran, screaming for help. Leia was already after them, cutting them down. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Ren barely looked at the killing. Instead, he checked the system's info on these so-called soldiers. Their stats were terrible. This wasn't an army, just thugs in uniform. Then he remembered his father's warning before he came to Aislinn. Beyond this place was enemy land, and one wrong move could spark disaster. If war broke out with the Empire, Ren would pay the price. Just as Leia finished off the last of them, a strong voice rang across the post, demanding to know who dared make trouble at Aislinn's gate. The surviving soldiers lit up with hope. General Caesar had arrived. They rushed to him, begging for help and pretending they were the victims. Caesar frowned, looked over the scene, then turned to Ren and demanded an explanation. Ren didn't waste time and used his skill to assess the general. Caesar's stats were strong, most above 70, making him dangerous, but his loyalty was only 12. Without that flaw, he would have been extremely useful. Ren stayed calm and greeted him directly, recognizing him as Caesar of the Holker family, whose brother served under his sister Phrygia Edgar. Caesar paused at the mention of his brother, clearly thrown off. He had already received a letter about Ren coming to Aislinn, along with orders to keep him safe, but other interests were pulling at him. A month earlier, Eldrick had come to him with a chest of gold and planted doubts in his mind, hinting that the Duke had sent him to this remote post because he more. Caesar still felt no regret. Looking at the young noble, he stood by the choice he had made. He grabbed his sword, called Ren a fake, and ordered his men to kill him for a reward. The soldiers paused for a moment, but Caesar, knowing full well what he'd done with Eldrick's bribes, refused to acknowledge Ren and ordered him seized and executed. Leia instantly burned with rage. This was open rebellion against the Empire. The soldiers hesitated, knowing their families could die for this. Caesar didn't back down. He reminded them they were already guilty. They had taken part in extortion, illegal tolls, and Eldrick's schemes. Then he brought up how Ren had ruined the Eldwin family and bankrupted 4 noble houses. So he offered one last gamble. Take their stolen wealth and Ren's head to the Orvis Empire, and they might buy new lives as minor nobles. It was simple. Keep living in fear, or risk everything for something bigger. The soldiers looked at each other, torn between fear and greed. In the end, they aimed their weapons at Ren. Caesar's confidence rose at once. Certain he had already won, he smugly told Ren to say his final words. Ren stayed calm and gave him one last chance to repent, but the greed in Caesar's eyes told him enough. Caesar answered by ordering the attack. The soldiers rushed in. Leia, furious, ripped part of her dress to move easier and charged them. She dropped one man with a clean strike. Another came at her with a spear, but she slipped past it, spun, and cut his throat with her dagger. Then she noticed a soldier going for Ren. Trusting Ren to handle himself, she still threw her knife and killed the man before he got close. Ren, out of patience, gave Caesar one final warning to stand down. Caesar refused and raised the reward, offering gold to whoever killed Ren. Greed drove the soldiers into a reckless charge. Caesar targeted Leia, thinking taking her out would turn the battle, but she saw it coming and smashed him with a brutal kick that threw him into the dirt. More soldiers rushed her, trying to win by numbers. She tore through them with smooth, fast blows, even sending several flying with a spinning kick. Realizing how strong Leia was, Caesar turned to his trump card, the mage. With a quick motion, the spellcaster fired 3 ice arrows at her. Leia shattered them in midair with rapid kicks, but the broken ice froze the ground under her feet and trapped her in place. Seeing the chance, Caesar shouted for everyone to attack. One group charged Leia while the other went for Ren. Ren stayed calm and tossed a hammer to Leia. He told her to jump, while in his other hand he held a wire connected to an electric device. Leia trusted him, smashed the ice around her feet with the hammer, broke free, and leaped up. The frozen ground became the perfect path for Ren's plan. The moment the wire touched it, electricity burst out through the ice and hit the charging soldiers, dropping them with screams. Standing on insulated ceramic pieces, Ren smiled, pleased with the result. The soldiers, still on their feet, froze in shock. They had never seen anything like it and thought it was forbidden magic. Caesar's fear turned to anger. He yelled for them to keep attacking, but one terrified soldier tried to warn the others that anyone who got close would die. Caesar killed him on the spot for hurting morale. Then he glared at the rest and gave them a choice: charge or die the same way. Even terrified, they had little choice. But even Leia started to worry. If Ren's power was that strong, why hadn't it hit everyone? Ren knew at once. The battery was empty. He had brought only one, and it was already drained. Leia sensed the danger and told him to run, but Ren only smiled. The fight wasn't over yet. Thinking Ren had no more tricks, Caesar ordered his men to chase him. They stepped forward, then suddenly stopped as a huge pillar of light dropped from the sky. The whole battlefield went still, and Caesar turned pale. A figure came down from above. Selena of the Mage Association had arrived, and the situation had just gotten much worse for them. Selena and the mages reached the battlefield at the perfect moment. With a smug smile, she said so, and Ren calmly admitted his battery had just died. She was curious about that strange power source, but dealing with Caesar came first. Selena didn't hesitate. She ordered the mages to wipe out the rebels, and lightning rained from from the sky. Bolt after bolt slammed into the ground, shaking the battlefield. The rebels screamed and begged for mercy, but the attack kept going. Survivors threw down their weapons and ran, crying for forgiveness through the chaos. Caesar still refused to surrender. With bloodshot eyes and pure hate, he charged straight at Ren, dodging the magic with surprising speed. He leaped up and unleashed an ice mountain slash meant to end it in one hit, but Ren didn't even move. Before the strike could land, Leia stepped in and blocked it with nothing but a small dagger. The impact cracked the ground under her, but she didn't budge. Caesar finally felt how huge the gap between them was. Before he could recover, Leia closed in and kicked him hard, sending him into a wooden fence. He crashed into it and passed out. An hour later, Caesar woke up tied up in front of Ren. Ren calmly looked through the seized records, his face cold in the lamplight, then pointed out how much Caesar had embezzled and asked when he started working with Eldrick. Caesar was shaken. Ren knew everything. Ren didn't wait for a reply. He had suspected Eldrick for a long time and had only been waiting for the right chance. Thanks to Caesar, that chance had come. Caesar mocked him, saying corruption records alone wouldn't bring Eldrick down. Ren found that funny. The records weren't for blackmail. They were for figuring out the city's tax income. He wasn't just exposing corruption, he meant to rebuild Iceland. Caesar laughed at that. Eldrick controlled the nobles, and none of them would side with Ren. Ren didn't care. He said the nobles had only two choices: follow Caesar into ruin or submit and work for him. There was no third option. A chill ran through Caesar as he realized Ren wasn't negotiating. He was removing obstacles. Later, Ren studied the city's failing walls and the dangers ahead. Autumn was coming, and Grand Duke Sauron would soon move his army. If war started, these defenses wouldn't last. The west was stable for now if talks with the elves worked, and the east was under his sister's control. The north, Sauron's land, was still the biggest threat. Leia came with a report. The seized funds totaled 350,000 gold coins. Ren ordered 100 gold coins given to each soldier and had the rest sent back to Iceland. With his own guards now holding the defenses, he could start rebuilding the city. Selena prepared to return to Iceland and thanked Ren for his help. Still, what she really wanted was to know how he used batteries without magic. Amused by her curiosity, Ren said he'd explain it on the way back. Happy with that answer, Selena quickly pulled him into the carriage. Just before they left, Malcolm ran over in a panic. He delivered urgent news. Eldrick had taken control of Aislan. Selena stared in shock, but Ren only smiled. Eldrick had finally acted. Selena grew anxious, knowing the Mage Association's forces were away, so stopping the rebellion from inside the city would be almost impossible. Ren, though, was completely calm. The moment Eldrick chose betrayal, his end had already been set. Ren led his forces to Aislan. At the gate, Eldrick stood on the wall with a smug grin, acting amused instead of worried by Ren's arrival. Ren ignored the mockery and asked the only thing that mattered. Why had Eldrick betrayed his father? That question hit hard, and Eldrick exploded with years of anger. He said he had fought beside Ren's father and risked his life to build the empire, only to be pushed aside in the end. He had been dumped in this miserable land while every request to leave was ignored. To him, this wasn't just betrayal. It was personal. Former soldiers stepped up behind him, men who also felt thrown away after years of service. With new confidence, Eldrick declared this wasn't rebellion, but justice. They weren't traitors. They were taking back what was theirs. Ren wasn't impressed. He saw it for what it was. Not honor, just another petty grievance. A power grab. He gave them one choice: surrender and live. If they stayed behind those walls, he'd break in within 3 days. The people on the walls burst out laughing. To them, taking Iceland in 3 days was impossible. Eldrick grew even bolder. He predlodged a bet. If Ren broke through in 3 days, he'd surrender. But if Ren failed, Ren would give himself up. Ren's allies told him not to accept. There was no reason to gamble when Grand Duke Sauron's reinforcements were already coming. But Eldrick kept pushing, trying to bait Ren into it. The second Ren agreed, Eldrick loudly announced the wager. Then he added one more thing with a smug grin. The Orvis Empire had already heard about the revolt, and their army would arrive in 10 days. Ren had a bigger problem than these walls. Still calm, Ren ordered camp set outside the city and went back to his tent. Selena pointed out the obvious. The walls were strong, and their numbers were small. Breaking in within 3 days sounded nearly impossible. Some suggested pulling south to wait for reinforcements, but Ren refused. What mattered most was the Orvis army. They couldn't waste time. He turned to Leia and asked about the firewood and hay. She said it was all ready, and they had found a nearby lake too. Satisfied, Ren ordered the mages to freeze the lake as much as possible. Selena didn't understand how that would bring down the walls. Ren only said the walls wouldn't last 3 days. At dawn, his troops marched to the gates carrying bundles of wood and hay instead of siege gear. Eldrick watched from above, confused. The soldiers dropped the piles at the base of the walls and pulled back. Eldrick's men started guessing what Ren was doing. Some thought he meant to burn the walls, which sounded absurd. Stone didn't burn, and Eldrick smacked one man for saying something so stupid. Then another guard suddenly shouted. The flames had started spreading. Eldrick just sneered. Did Ren really think fire could hurt stone? He refused to waste arrows or magic on something so ridiculous. In his mind, Ren was only making himself look foolish. By the second day, Eldrick was sure Ren had wasted his time burning the walls for nothing. Then a panicked subordinate came in and reported the enemy had stopped attacking. Eldrick only laughed, convinced Ren had run out of options. He called everyone over to watch Ren's humiliation. From the wall, Eldrick mocked Ren and waited for him to admit defeat. Instead, Ren stayed cold and gave one last warning: surrender or die. Eldrick laughed and reminded him of their bet. If the walls were still standing by sundown, Ren would lose. The nobles beside him joined in, mocking the so-called genius. Ren ignored them and gave a single order. At once, Selena rose into the air, power building around her. A thunderous crack shook the battlefield as dark clouds gathered overhead. Then she released the spell. A huge bolt of lightning crashed down, not on Eldrick, but into the wall beneath him. Eldrick blinked, then laughed again. To him, it looked like she had missed. But the sky grew darker, thunder rolled again, and a violent storm poured over the battlefield. Eldrick's grin faded. Something was wrong. Before he could figure it out, Ren's soldiers rushed forward, carrying buckets of ice-cold water. Selena nearly collapsed from the strain, but Ren caught her. He hadn't expected her to change the weather itself. She worried the plan might fail, but Ren told her it was working. Then Leia suddenly shouted a warning. By then, the soldiers had reached the walls and dumped the freezing water over the heated stone. Steam burst up at once. Then came a sharp cracking sound. Small fractures spread across the walls. Eldrick froze as the cracks widened faster and faster. His nobles shouted in panic. Then a huge section of the wall exploded apart. The ground gave way beneath Eldrick and his men, throwing them into the rubble. Even Ren's army paused for a moment, shocked by how completely the fortress collapsed. Ren didn't hesitate. He ordered the attack. His troops charged into the city. Anyone who surrendered would live. Anyone who fought would die. Seeing the walls fall crushed the rebels' spirit. Most threw down their weapons. The battle was over. Selena stared in disbelief. Even with all her strength, she wasn't sure she could have caused that much damage. Ren simply told her not to think about it now. They were done here. Under the rubble, Eldrick dragged himself out, battered and barely awake. Even then, he clung to one last hope. If he escaped and lasted until the Orvis army arrived, he might still live. But as he stood up, a shadow fell over him. 3 nobles were waiting. One stepped forward and mocked him. They had no intention of dying for his sake. For Eldrick, there was no escape left. After crushing the last rebels, Ren led his army through Island's gates. The citizens cheered his victory, and the city was stunned that his army had taken almost no serious losses. Selena rushed over, unable to hold back her questions. How had he destroyed the fortress so easily? Ren sighed, knowing she wouldn't drop it. He gave a short explanation. Heat the stone, then cool it too fast, and it cracks apart. Selena just stared blankly. The idea meant nothing to her. Amused, Ren promised to explain later after he handled a few things. Near the broken wall, a weak voice begged for mercy. One of the nobles who had backed Eldrick lay there pleading for his life. The others quickly joined in, blaming Eldrick and claiming they had only been tricked. Some even offered their wealth to save themselves. Ren said nothing. When one noble argued that punishing them would make future loyalty impossible, Ren laughed. People weren't loyal to rulers. They were loyal to their own interests. He ordered them all captured and left their punishment for later. At Eldrick's mansion, panic had already set in. Sweating and shaking, Eldrick begged a masked man to help him escape. The man was stunned that the city had fallen so fast. Eldrick explained that Ren heated the walls for days, then shattered them with cold water. The masked man refused to believe something that simple could break a fortress. To him, it had to be magic. But there was no time to argue. Eldrick urged him to teleport them away before Ren arrived. The masked man opened a teleport scroll and started casting, but a calm voice cut in. Ren had entered the room. Eldrick froze. His escape had left the city open, letting Ren take control with barely any resistance. Ren looked at the masked man and mocked him. Was he hiding a scar, or was his face just that ugly? The man stiffened, then warned Ren not to celebrate yet. The Orvis Empire's army was already coming, and with the walls gone, Ren had only made his own fall come faster. Then he went back to the spell, the invasion. Ren didn't panic. He'd already planned for it. Soon after, he called the people of Island to the town square. Selena thought he was going to calm everyone down, but when Ren stepped up and used a voice amplifier, his words did the opposite. He announced that the Orvis Empire's army would arrive in just a few days. Gasps spread through the crowd, then panic. Some people shook, others started yelling, and the whole square fell into chaos. Selena stared at Ren in shock. Was he really trying to scare everyone like this? The second he revealed the coming attack, the square erupted. Island had barely survived one uprising, and now another war was coming. Some people wanted to grab their valuables and run. Others hesitated, not wanting to give up the safety and prosperity they'd found under Ren. Alarmed, Selena pulled him aside. She warned that telling everyone so bluntly would only make them panic. Ren frowned, not seeing the problem. To him, soldiers didn't need calm. They needed emotion. People fought harder with fear and anger than with reason, which only confused Selena more. Instead of explaining, Ren faced the crowd again, took out a scroll, and raised his voice. He claimed the Orvis Empire had sent a message calling the people of Island cowards and fools, saying Ren should run while he still could. The square went quiet for a beat, then exploded in rage. The Empire had taken their grain for years, and this time the people refused to run. They would fight. Ren smiled and pushed further, asking if they really were cowards, or if they were ready to defend their home. The crowd roared back, anger turning into resolve. They swore to fight to the death, one enemy each, or two if they could. With their spirit lit, Ren made his last move. If they stood with him, he promised to lead them to victory. Cheers shook the square as fear turned into desperate, stubborn resolve. Later that night, while the city got ready for war, Ren sat in his office studying maps. Leah came in and offered him tea. He accepted, but said there was no time to rest. If he couldn't find a solution before the Orvis army arrived, Iceland would fall. Leah frowned. He had looked fearless in front of the people, but now he was clearly worried. Ren set down his cup and admitted that confidence was an act. Without it, the city would have collapsed into panic, and even evacuation would fail. Fear made people more dangerous than enemies. Leah, more worried than ever, urged him to leave quietly before things got worse. Her concern moved him, but he refused. He had already sent Malcolm and Selena to evacuate the children, elderly, and weak. They weren't done fighting yet. Then Ren looked at a notebook on his desk labeled Blue-Black Magic Oil. He didn't know much about it or whether it was dangerous, so he handed the book to Leah and asked if she knew it. After a pause, she said it was a flammable liquid often used in rituals. Ren immediately understood. A highly flammable liquid sounded a lot like petroleum. If this magic oil worked the same way, it might be the key to saving the city. He instantly told Leah to take him to the warehouse where the records said it was stored. When they got there, he ordered the servants to find any barrels of black-green magic oil and keep them away from fire. If it was stored in barrels, it had to be useful for something. While they waited, Ren looked over the warehouse. Among the gold and treasure was the tax wealth Eldrick had taken from the people of Orvis over the years. After the crisis, that money could fund Iceland's industrial future. If he built steam engines, the city could grow faster than the kingdom had ever seen. Soon the servants returned with several large barrels. Ren's heart raced. If they held what he thought, then the city still had hope. He hurried over as the first barrel was opened. Inside was exactly what he wanted. Iceland would not fall. Not now, not ever. Meanwhile, in the Orvis Empire's camp, Count Castiel sat in his tent while Eldrick and Ravenclaw Eldwin stood before him, both clearly nervous. Raven spoke first, apologizing for their failure, but Castiel didn't care about excuses. He had expected poor results, but losing a city in 3 days was disgraceful. Eldrick quickly blamed Ren, saying forbidden magic destroyed the walls. Without it, they could have held on until the Orvis army arrived. Castiel narrowed his eyes. If forbidden magic was used, then Ren's father must have sent a powerful mage to help him. Ravenclaw Eldwin replied that such magic couldn't be cast again so soon, and with Iceland's walls broken, the city wouldn't last long. This was the best time to strike. Castiel brushed them off. He didn't need advice from failures. They were finished here and would return to Orvis to wait. Raven's face darkened. The campaign had been planned with Castiel, so why was he suddenly being pushed aside? Castiel didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out a scroll and tossed it in front of Raven. Raven hesitated, then opened it. As he read, his whole body went stiff. The letter said the war had started because of Raven's personal grudge and the bloodshed was his fault. It also claimed Castiel wanted peace, and as proof, had ordered Raven's arrest. By handing him over, the Orvis Empire hoped to restore peace. Raven shook with fury and accused Castiel of betraying him, but Castiel's face turned cold. He immediately ordered his men to arrest Ravenclaw Eldwin. Raven fought back and shouted in rage, but it changed nothing. The soldiers overpowered him and dragged him away. Eldrick stood there shaking. He had backed the wrong side, and if he didn't save himself now, he'd share Raven's fate. Castiel slowly looked at him, then quietly asked what should be done with him. Eldrick dropped to his knees and begged for his life, saying he knew a secret that could raise Castiel even higher in the Orvis Empire. That caught Castiel's attention, so Eldrick was spared for the moment. But what secret could be that valuable? In the grand chamber of the Lord's mansion in Thurland, Priscilla sat reading a letter, her usual warmth fading. It was from Leah, warning her about the betrayal happening in Iceland. Seeing Ren's name first stirred old memories, but as she kept reading, that feeling turned to anger. She immediately ordered Gwen to bring Valis Holker at once. When Valis arrived, he knelt before her, confused and uneasy. He had no idea why she was so furious. The moment Priscilla accused House Holker of treason, he went pale and tried to deny it, insisting his family had no reason to betray her after all she had done for their trade routes. Without saying a word, Priscilla threw the letter at him. It said Eldrick had joined Grand Duke Castiel of the Orvis Empire and worked with several Iceland nobles, including General Caesar Holker of the Border Army. Ren had already captured and executed Caesar, but Leah warned the rest of House Holker might also be involved and told Priscilla to stay careful. As Valis read, his hands shook and sweat formed on his brow. He swore this was Caesar's doing alone, not the family's. He said he had even written Caesar, ordering him to obey Ren. Begging her to investigate, he insisted House Holker never meant to betray her. Priscilla watched him closely. He didn't seem to be lying, and after a long silence, she considered that maybe Caesar had acted alone. Seeing her uncertainty, Valis threw himself down and begged for a chance to prove his family's loyalty. To show good faith, he offered to send his only daughter, Rosalind, to lead troops in support of Ren against the Orvis army. Priscilla hesitated. Rosalind was young and still training at the Knight Academy. If something happened to her, House Holker would lose its only heir, but Valis insisted that without Priscilla's help, his family was already finished. At last, Priscilla agreed, though she stayed wary. After Valis left, she told Gwen to have Rosalind secretly watched. If she showed any sign of betrayal, she was to be killed immediately. Meanwhile, outside Islin, Eldrick and Grand Duke Castiel stood on a cliff overlooking the city. Eldrick confirmed it was Islin and said that if they broke through, the city would be Castiel's. He noticed Ren had used emergency magic to repair the walls and dig a trench for extra defense, but Castiel laughed it off. To him, using precious mana on walls was foolish. If Ren's mages had any strength before, they had now wasted it on useless fortifications. Eldrick wondered if the repaired walls would still make the assault harder, but Castiel dismissed that too. Islin had no real natural defenses, just plains and a small river. That wouldn't stop an army, and with Ren's mages drained, they couldn't resist an all-out attack. Eldrick quickly praised Castiel's brilliance, feeding the Grand Duke's ego, but one of Castiel's knights suggested another option. Instead of attacking head-on, they could surround the city and starve the city out. Castiel hated the idea, taking it as a jab at his strength. The knight dropped to one knee and said he only wanted to cut losses. Castiel didn't care. He wanted Islin crushed head-on. He ordered a mage to come with him to the walls, sure his presence alone would scare Ren into surrender. Inside, Ren was busy with another problem. He still needed 5 talented people to train, and half a month had passed with no time to pick them. While he thought it over, Leia came in and said Grand Duke Castiel was outside with a mage, demanding to see him. Ren soon stepped onto the city wall, where the soldiers greeted him with worried faces. Above them, Castiel laughed loudly and got ready to speak. Ren cut him off first, mocking him and asking if this clown was really Grand Duke Castiel. The soldiers burst out laughing. Even Leia calmly agreed that yes, this idiot really was Castiel. Castiel shook with anger. He snapped that not even Ren's father would have talked to him like that. Ren didn't care and simply asked why Castiel had come to the western lands. Now fully enraged, Castiel shouted that he was giving Ren one last chance. If Ren surrendered, Islin would be spared. Ren smirked and gave his own answer. If Castiel wanted to live, he should turn around and leave with his army. Castiel burned with rage at being told to retreat. To him, Ren was just a brat pretending to understand war. He pointed at the walls and bragged that he had 100,000 troops. If Ren wanted to avoid a horrible death, he needed to surrender now. Ren looked bored, almost yawned, then told Leia to shut Castiel up. Leia nodded and lifted her dress just enough to show the daggers strapped to her legs. Without waiting, she pulled one free and hurled it at him. The mage beside Castiel panicked and rushed to cast a barrier, but Leia's throw cut right through it and sliced Castiel's cheek. Blood ran down his face. He froze for a second, then looked at Ren with pure hatred. He had come to threaten him and ended up humiliated. Ren stayed calm and warned that next time, Leia wouldn't miss. Castiel could do nothing. He stormed off, and once he was gone, Ren's smile vanished. He turned serious and told Selena the Orvis Empire would attack soon. They had to be ready. Back at camp, Castiel was still furious, and his knights weren't sure whether to mention the cut on his face. When one finally asked about it, Castiel brushed it off. The wound meant nothing. The insult was what mattered. He ordered an immediate attack and demanded Ren be brought to him in chains. A knight carefully suggested letting the army rest first. They had marched 3 days, the siege weapons weren't ready, and they still needed a bridge over the river. Castiel answered with a punch to the knight's face. How dare he question him? He yelled, asking if 3 days of marching had already broken the soldiers of the great Orvis Empire. The knight, hurting but steady, said the men might fight, but attacking now without prep was reckless. The other knights quietly agreed, but Castiel insisted Ren would expect them to wait. Striking now could catch the city off guard. Some officers saw the point, yet the troops were clearly exhausted. Castiel ignored that and ordered the attack to begin. In the camp, the soldiers had just put up their tents and were glad to finally rest after the brutal march. One complained he was about to collapse, and another said army life was worse than he imagined. Then a soldier grinned and said he had good news. The others told him to spit it out. He'd seen someone butchering a sheep, so a real meal had to be coming. That lifted their spirits for a second, then it was gone. A commander arrived and ordered them to gather at once. The attack on the city was starting. The men fell silent. One finally asked if they could at least eat first, but the commander said no. Castiel had spoken. With no choice, they got ready for battle. Soon the Orvis army marched on Aislinn, charging toward the walls, only to meet the wide river in their path. From the wall, Ren watched them closely. When a soldier asked if they should start shooting, Ren didn't answer. He kept watching. The enemy crossing looked messy and slow. Something was wrong. Then he asked if anyone there had fought the Orvis army before. A veteran stepped forward and said he had. Ren pointed at the enemy and asked if they looked weak, or if Orvis soldiers had always been this thin. The man studied them and said they were probably recruits, but there was more. They looked half-starved. Ren frowned. An army going to war with no food made no sense. The soldier offered one guess. Their supplies were low. Then he gave a second, darker one. Ren told him to continue. The man said Castiel might be using these recruits as bait, throwing them away to make Aislinn waste arrows before the real attack. Ren's face darkened, and his fists tightened. He muttered that these men were still citizens of the Orvis Empire. The soldier sighed and said most nobles didn't care. Unlike Ren and his father, they saw soldiers as tools. Ren said nothing. If Castiel treated his own men like that, then he deserved no mercy. The veteran added that with their arrows, they could wipe out these recruits easily and waited for the order. But instead, Ren smirked and said not to fire. The soldiers stared in shock. As enemy troops swam through the water to reach the gate, Ren told Selena to have every mage use cold wind magic. Selena moved at once, flying out and chanting as dark clouds gathered. Watching this, Castile thought Ren was an idiot. When a soldier asked why, Castile explained that the recruits were only a feint to waste Aislin's arrows. Instead, Ren was draining his mages on them. Castile said that once those mages were spent, he'd send in his own magician and main force, and the city would fall easily. The men around him praised his brilliant plan, and Castile started thinking about locking Ren up for this blunder. Back at the walls, the mages unleashed the wind. The enemy soldiers were confused and scared, some shouting about things they wished they'd done before dying. They grabbed onto trees in panic. Their leader yelled at them to hold their weapons and charge. Ren and Selena watched, and Selena asked if simple wind magic would really stop them. She suggested using lightning instead. Ren refused. Since ancient times, he said, hunger and cold had broken people's will to fight. If the wind kept them from even standing straight, they wouldn't have the spirit to attack. The soldiers were freezing and losing heart. Their officers shouted for them to keep moving, but the men cried that their hands were numb, they couldn't lift their weapons, and they had no strength from hunger. One even suggested retreating. The commander sent a runner to report to Castile and told the rest to keep advancing. At Castile's camp, a foot soldier arrived and was led inside. Injured and bitter, he hated that they were freezing on the front while others stayed comfortable. He reported that Ren's wind magic had stalled the attack, and the starving soldiers were too weak to fight. He begged Castile to order a temporary retreat. Castile exploded, calling the men cowards unfit to be soldiers of the Orvis Empire. The messenger argued that they weren't scared to die. They were too hungry to keep going. Castile ordered the soldier executed and decided to lead the army himself. A soldier says Castile doesn't need to put himself in danger when his men are already ready to die for him. Castile laughs and says he knows they're loyal, but he wants the generals to see how brilliant he is. They arrive soon after. At the city entrance, Castile orders the mages to use earth magic to make a bridge so the army can cross the waterway. The mages obey, and soon the bridge is done, while no one notices the pipes hidden in the city wall leading into the waterway. Once it's finished, Castile tells the troops to charge and promises a reward to whoever captures Rain alive. The soldiers rush toward the city. Inside the walls, a soldier warns Rain that Castile is getting ready for a real attack. Rain tells Leia to pour the black liquid into the waterway and seal the passages on both sides. Leia orders the soldiers to use the pipes and dump the black liquid into the waterway, darkening the water as the enemy crosses the bridge. Far away, a force rides hard under Rosalind, who pushes them faster because she can't let anything happen to Rain. She remembers her father telling her their family's future depends on her now, and she promised to keep Rain safe. That promise still drives her forward. While she rides, an exhausted soldier begs for a short break. He says the men can still move, and so can Rosalind, but the horses are nearly spent after 3 days without rest. She doesn't delay and asks how much longer it will take to reach Iceland City at this pace. The soldiers answer that they are still 1 day away from the city. Wanting a clearer picture, Rosalind tells a mage to show the route while they keep moving. The mage makes a magic map, and Rosalind studies it with growing worry. She thinks the Orvis Empire may have already broken through the border, trapping Rain inside. She also remembers her father saying Rain's move a few days earlier left Iceland City dangerously short on food. As she thinks, she suddenly pulls the reins and stops, then loudly calls for Nox. She says she knows he's been watching her and tells him to come out so they can decide what to do. The soldiers whisper in confusion because they see no one, but the air twists and Nox steps out from between dimensions, revealing himself as Nox Old. At once, the energy around him turns dark and tense, and a soldier orders the others to protect Rosalind. Another asks who this strange mage is, but Rosalind stops him with a sharp gesture. She stares at Nox, making sure he is really who she thinks he is, and Nox coldly tells her to speak quickly and clearly. Rosalind gets right to it. She says she'll send troops to cut off the Orvis army's food, then surround and capture the forces trapped below Eastland City. She knows Priscilla sent Nox to watch her, but now she needs his help. She says his help matters now. Nox answers that his only order is to kill Rosalind if she becomes a threat to Rain, so he was never told to help her. Rosalind gives a small smile and says she knows that, but she also knows neither of them wants Rain hurt. With no better option, Nox agrees and asks what she needs him to do. Rosalind lays out the plan. She will move her army around Aisland City and strike from the rear. Meanwhile, Nox must go above the waterway near the border fortress and seal it with magic. When her mage gives the signal, he must release the water all at once at the right moment. That flood will sweep through the Orvis soldiers. The scene then shifts to Varshala, where an elf queen wrapped in bandages sits reading a paper, hoping both sides can still make a useful deal. She quietly hopes the agreement can work. After reading it, she asks the others what they think. A young elf named Salian quickly says humans are greedy and deceitful, so trusting them or making a deal is foolish. An older, calmer elf replies that their people are too weak to survive winter on their own, and they still have to buy food from humans each year. If they refuse this deal, things could get even worse. The queen then turns to Ayuria, the quiet human nun, and asks for her view since she is the only one who has met the new mayor of Iceland City in person. Ayuria nods and says the mayor is full of tricks, but he is also very smart. She still can't believe how Rain pulled off something so huge. He told her they not only have enough food for winter, they also saved a lot of money. Castiel stares at Rain, fear sinking deep into him. He calls Rain a devil and wonders if he really means to burn 100,000 people alive, without a second thought. As the horror spreads, a soldier begs Castiel to order a retreat, and he finally snaps back to reality. He gives the order to fall back, climbs onto his horse, and yells for the mages to put out the fire. But another soldier rushes in with awful news. The mages are out of magic. They spent their last strength making the barrier earlier, and have nothing left. Selena wipes sweat from her brow as she watches the firestorm ahead, realizing this is the power of forbidden magic. What shocks her more is that Rain made such a devastating blaze with only a few barrels of oil and no magic at all. Enemy soldiers scream for help and try to flee, but most have nowhere to go. From above, Rain watches and decides that if he wants to save his people from ever facing this again, he needs to build a strong industrial system soon. Then pain hits his head and dizziness follows. He tells Selena to finish the rest while he goes ahead to rest. Selena smiles faintly, then orders the mages to wipe out the remaining Orvis soldiers without mercy. Before long, the fire spreads farther over the waterway and thick smoke makes it hard to breathe. Castiel leans on a soldier for support as he tries to escape, stumbling through the smoke and fire. When he finally reaches the main base, he finds it completely empty. Then he feels something from above and looks up. A sword slams down beside him, knocking him to the ground in terror, and a woman walks toward it. Castiel shakily asks the woman's name. She studies him with cold eyes and guesses he is a noble of the Orvis Empire. Stepping closer, she says she has been looking for him for a long time. Castiel turns pale and trembles as he asks what she wants. Rosalind steps closer and demands to know where the rest of his forces are and whether Rain is still safe. When Castiel says nothing, she starts beating him and orders him to answer. After more blows, Castiel finally yells that he'll talk. He says their whole army was destroyed by Rain's forbidden fire magic. Then he tries to act important, saying he is a Grand Duke and can't be treated this way. That only makes Rosalind angrier. She calls him a liar, then tells her soldiers to drag him away and beat him until he tells the truth. Rosalind takes over the base and stands in the tent, studying the map while a soldier reports. He says Castiel still insists he's a Grand Duke despite repeated beatings. Now he's making an even crazier claim, that 100,000 of his men were burned alive at Island City's border fortress by Rain using forbidden magic. That report makes Rosalind furious, and she slams her fist on the table. She orders them to beat Castiel harder until he tells the truth, then commands the army to rest until dusk. After that, they'll march to the border fortress to reach Rain and help him. The soldier nods and leaves the tent to carry out her orders. Rosalind walks outside, thinking over Castiel's words, especially the earthen bridge over the waterway near the border fortress. Since it was left intact, it could help them pass. But if her army wants through the fortress gates, they'll need to lure the soldiers out and work with Priscilla's mage. She keeps planning the best formation to reach Rain in time, then wonders if she can avoid the border fortress and go straight into Aisland City instead. But before she can think more, she hears something and immediately warns the soldiers that someone is coming. A nearby soldier tells her to stay back, then shouts for the enemy to show themselves, saying their whole army is ready and won't be caught by a surprise attack. Then the enemy steps out from the trees and shadows. The people stepping out are elves from Varshala. Rosalind recognizes them at once and suspects they joined the Orvis Empire. She snaps that the elves betrayed Rain and came to hurt him. Salian fires back, furious. She says that's a lie. Rain was the one who first contacted their queen and asked for a meeting. Rosalind is making them sound like traitors. Rosalind laughs it off and says she doesn't believe a word of it. To her, the elves are clearly siding with the Orvis Empire and just pretending otherwise. That pushes Salian over the edge, and she orders the elf archers to aim at Rosalind. Rosalind reacts right away, telling her men to raise their shields and protect her. Before either side attacks, the Elf Queen steps in and casts a wide barrier of space magic. She tells Rosalind to stop and calmly explains that she came because Rain sent a letter asking to talk business. Since Rosalind is Rain's ally, there is no reason for them to fight. If Rosalind still sees the elves as enemies, they will leave and meet Rain after the war ends. Rosalind asks for proof. The Queen immediately tells Ayura to bring the letter. Ayura obeys. Rosalind checks the seal and knows it's real. Family seals carry marks no one can fake. She agrees to trust the elves for now, but says she will have someone watch them while she goes to find Rain. The Elf Queen nods and says caution makes sense for both sides. Rosalind tells her soldiers to stand down and keep resting since the plan has not changed. Back in the tent, she orders a soldier to secretly watch the elves and report anything suspicious at once. He accepts the order and leaves. The elves move on, and Salian asks the Queen why she still wants trade with humans who clearly don't trust them. The Queen calmly says that if humans trusted elves so easily, they wouldn't be human. Looking ahead, she quietly hopes Rain won't disappoint her, because the elves need a future of new beginnings, not ruin. As Rosalind's army marches on, scouts return with news. The flag over the border fortress is not the Orvis banner. It still bears the Rain family mark. Rosalind realizes Castiel had been telling the truth, but there is no time to dwell on it. She gets back on her horse. They have to reach Rain before it's too late. As they near the fortress, Rosalind orders their flag raised high so whoever is inside will know Rain's allies have arrived. She then commands the army army not to stop at the bridge and to ride straight for Island City. They must reach it before night ends. At the fortress, Rain stands with Leia, looking over the fallen soldiers. His hand trembles as he thinks about how strong the enemy was. He also realizes those soldiers might have ended up dying as slaves in a brutal sweatshop if things had gone another way. Rain covers his face, weighed down by grief even for enemies who came to destroy his land. Seeing that, Leia thinks Rain must be truly kind. She gently tells him not to mourn people who chose this path and are now paying for it. Rain starts to answer, but a soldier runs in with urgent news. Another army is approaching fast from the Orvis Empire side. The soldier adds that the banner belongs to the second, then the story jumps to Island City, where Rain sits with Leia across from the Elf Queen. He lays out his vision for the city's future, saying Island can become the pearl of the continent if she helps make it real. Using a map, Rain shows her the city he wants to build. If she supports it, he says, she won't just help create something great, she'll be remembered as one of its founders. The Elf Queen listens in silence, but even if some of it interests her, she knows such plans mean little to elves. They have lived with nature too long for cities of stone to matter much. Rain is caught off guard by her calm refusal, as she says elves can live well without any of it. Still, Rain doesn't back down. He says her view is too narrow if she thinks need is simply natural. Need comes from desire, and desire can be created, he explains. That is how people keep moving forward. But the Queen quietly says human needs mean little to her people. What humans build is not always necessary, and she has watched great empires crumble because they always wanted more. Rain agrees that greed can destroy kingdoms, but says desire also drives progress. With growing passion, he starts listing examples. Humans wanted to fly, so they made airplanes. They wanted to go beneath the sea, so they built submarines. They reached for the stars and created spacecraft. That is why he admires human desire. He tells the Queen that one day she will stand atop a tall building in the center of the city, look down, and feel something she has never felt before. His passion shakes her, but she still cannot fully grasp what he means. Even so, she admits his belief is rare and powerful. But elves are different. They have lived for thousands of years without serving desire. She asks if his words and city plans can really change that. Rain answers boldly. If she invests, they can make that future real together. The word future makes the Elf Queen think back to the vision she saw in the magic orb, a terrible future where elves were slaughtered by humans in a great war. She wonders if working with Rain could stop that from happening, but she still doesn't agree. She praises his drive, yet says it isn't enough, and she must speak with her people first. Rain takes it calmly and says he understands. He'll wait for her investment whenever the time comes. Then he tells Leia to bring something. Leia steps forward and hands over a rolled paper. The Elf Queen takes it. Rain says it's an invitation to the grand ceremony for the Island City Dam, along with a VIP seat at the center of the city's first major industrial step. The scene shifts back to Rosalind, still riding hard toward Iceland with her army behind her. A soldier brings word that Rain is safe and is clearing the battlefield near the border fortress. Rosalind is stunned, because she expected the Orvis Empire to send 100,000 troops. Castiel's words come back to her, and she starts to wonder if Rain got help from a forbidden mage. Even so, she pushes the thought aside. Her duty is to reach him as fast as she can. At last, they reach the border fortress and slow their horses. Rosalind dismounts, goes inside, and finds Rain sitting calmly on a sofa. She bows, introduces herself, and says Priscilla sent her to support him. Then she admits she failed to arrive when he needed help most and asks to be punished. Rain asks if his older sister truly sent her. When Rosalind says yes, he asks why she came from the Orvis Empire side. She explains that her unit set out 3 days earlier, but she believed Rain had already left the fortress for Aislan, so she changed course to block the Orvis Empire's route. Retreat. Rain is shocked they reached Aislan so fast from hundreds of kilometers away. He asks how they got there without a railroad. Rosalind admits she has no idea what that is. Rain cuts her off, tells her not to worry, and says she's done enough. She rises with a faint smile and says it was nothing. Protecting him is the Holker family's duty. Then ashamed, she adds that her uncle caused trouble. Hearing that name, Rain quickly asks if she's related to Caesar. Rosalind lowers her head and says she's Caesar Holker's niece. She begs Rain to give her family one more chance and asks him to punish her if he must. She won't resist. Rain says nothing. Later, Rosalind sits alone in a large room, troubled by the silence. Rain hasn't come back all day, and she knows earning his trust won't be easy. She hasn't even been allowed to see him again. She sighs, wondering what will happen to her and her family from here. Then Rain finally walks in and calmly apologizes for making her wait. Her heart skips, but he tells her to relax. He only came to discuss something important. She steels herself, ready to accept anything if it can save her family. Rain holds out his hand and asks her to become one of his people. The simple gesture makes her blush as her heart starts pounding. He steps closer and says her choices on the battlefield left a strong impression. Even at 18, she has great ability and real value to him, someone worth training and raising up. Her bold rear attack and courage at the front showed rare talent, enough to make him watch her for the future. Rosalind bows and thanks him, saying that as one who serves him, acting without hesitation is only natural. He asks again if she is truly ready to belong to him. Red-faced, she nods and says that if he wants to use her to ease his anger, she'll give him everything she has without complaint. His eyes widen at once. She has clearly misunderstood him. He raises a hand and calmly says he never meant anything like repayment or compensation. Still blushing, Rosalind bows lower and says that while she dreams of becoming a knight by his side, if her body is the only way to repay her uncle's sins, she'll accept it without resistance. Rain cuts in again and firmly says she still got it wrong. This isn't personal. He only sees her as a possible subordinate. Rosalind tilts her head, still not fully understanding. So he makes it plain. He's asking if she'll officially join him as a knight. He also promises that neither she nor her family will be punished for Caesar Holker's actions. Then he straightens up and, in a more formal tone, asks once more if she is ready to swear loyalty and serve as one of his own. Relief lights up Rosalind's face. She's overjoyed. Her fate isn't to become a toy, but a knight, the dream she's had since childhood. She stands straight and proudly says it would be the greatest honor of her life to serve Rain as a knight and follow him into whatever comes next. Later, Rain sits in his study writing a letter while Leah waits nearby. He mentions the troubles facing Iceland and the gifted knight recently sent to him. After sealing the letter, he tells Leah to deliver it to his second sister and include an invitation to the dam completion ceremony. Leah nods and moves to carry it out right away. After she leaves, Rain opens Rosalind's stats and thinks about how badly he needs more talent. He needs 5 people with high attributes, but so far only 1 has shown up. Then Leah returns and asks what to do with Castiel, whom Rosalind captured earlier. Rain frowns, realizing he forgot all about him. When he asks where Castiel is, Leah says he's in the city dungeon. Rain immediately heads down to the underground cells. In the dim dungeon, Castiel sits behind bars with an empty look until Rain steps into sight. Castiel looks up and mutters that he is finished. Rain is confused and reminds him that Castiel is the one in jail, not him. Castiel laughs bitterly and asks if Rain's father ever told him the truth. Then he says mages who use forbidden spells are never allowed to join battles between ordinary people. By doing that, Rain has broken a law that could endanger his whole family, because forbidden mages across the continent may come seeking revenge. Rain raises a brow and asks if Castiel means Selena, but Castiel says no. Selena is strong, but not what he's talking about. He means mages who can call down huge destruction, far beyond anything most people have seen. Rain pauses, then realizes Castiel means the earlier explosion from the oil barrels. He says if that's the issue, there's no need to worry. He can make explosions like that whenever he wants. Castiel is stunned. He calls it nonsense, saying power like that belongs only to a forbidden mage, not a normal person. He warns that such power could destroy entire worlds and should never be treated lightly. Rain scoffs and says that power isn't stuck in the past anymore. Now it's in his hands. He narrows his eyes and says he came here for one truth from Castiel, the real mastermind behind all this, and their exact plan. Castiel glares and denies there is any mastermind. He says Orvis warriors don't need a reason to charge the so-called cowards of the Caledorial Empire. Rain laughs and says that after studying Island's history, he noticed a pattern. Every spring, Orvis troops cross the border, seize land and towns, then pull back later without holding them. Every fall, they retreat just as fast, as if following some hidden order. That's too deliberate to be random. Either Orvis is led by fools, or these wars are covering some other goal. Castiel stiffens and snaps that they don't care about the barren land Rain calls home. They only want to show their power to the world. But Rain pushes back, saying it feels less like a display and more like they're testing something secret. When Castiel stammers, Rain tells him to think carefully. Then the truth may come out. As Rain leaves, he's convinced these yearly wars are staged to hide a much bigger plot, and he swears to uncover it. To do that, he must build Azalin's industry fast. He refuses to stay in the dark any longer. 10 days later, in Sealand at Silver Wave Harbor, Gwen delivers Rain's letter to Priscilla. Reading it, Priscilla learns Rain has officially chosen Rosalind as his knight. She tells Gwen to inform Willis that Rain favors his daughter and he can rest easy. As she keeps reading, she reaches the part about the dam ceremony and grows curious. She pauses and asks Gwen if she knows what a dam is. Gwen bows and admits she doesn't, saying she's not clever enough to grasp Rain's plans. Priscilla quickly decides to travel to Iceland herself and see the dam in person. Gwen happily nods. Then Priscilla tells her to find several girls around Rosalind's age. She wants to know what kind of person her younger brother likes. In the grand hall of the Orvis Palace, the emperor sits on his throne, frustrated, while the nobles stand in tense silence. One noble says Grand Duke Castiel's capture will surely shake the soldiers and crush morale. Another quietly asks who let Castiel follow his own stubborn plan and end up in this disaster. The emperor slams the armrest and demands solutions, not blame. He says arguing over fault now is pointless. A careful noble then suggests sending someone to Iceland to talk with the enemy and seek peace instead of dragging out the war. Before that idea settles, another noble shouts that the mighty Orvis Empire must never stoop to negotiating with such a savage land. A different noble agrees, saying giving in even a little to the Kurtural Empire would bring shame. Still, the first noble insists that if Castiel reveals even one secret, every plan the empire built for years could be ruined. He begs the emperor to choose wisely before it's too late. The emperor goes quiet, thinking hard, then slowly admits peace talks may be allowed. Still, he wonders if anyone among them is capable enough to handle such an "it's too late." The emperor falls silent, seeming to think deeply, then slowly agrees that perhaps peace talks can be allowed. However, he wonders aloud if anyone in their ranks is strong and wise enough to handle such an for the job. The envoy, he says, must have a title worthy of the empire, and be smart and brave enough to make it back alive. One noble, Craven, catches the hidden meaning in those words. He realizes this mission is about more than peace. When the emperor turns to him, Craven bows and offers a name he thinks suits the task. Wilvina, the only daughter of Duke Richard. The hall starts murmuring. Someone points out that Duke Richard is in prison after angering the emperor. Even so, the emperor keeps watching Craven, quietly weighing his motives. Craven lays out his reasons. First, Wilvina's noble blood would show the Empire is serious. Second, though newly grown, she's already shown sharp judgment and quick action. Third, this mission could let her restore her father's honor, and if she succeeds, the Emperor might forgive Duke Richard. Another noble agrees the argument makes sense. After a pause, the Emperor accepts and gives the mission to Craven, ordering him to keep Wilvina alive at all costs. Craven bows deeply and swears he won't fail. Later, in a dark part of the palace, the Emperor meets a kneeling figure. He says Wilvina and Castiel will soon return and that the figure already knows what to do. The figure bows lower and vows both will die before leaving Kurtaral. The Emperor smiles cruelly. If Orvis's envoy dies there, he'll gain one more excuse for war. Far from the palace, the story moves to a busy market. Rain walks through as a merchant warmly asks if he's shopping. Rain laughs and says he's just checking on the people to see what they still need. The townsfolk thank him, saying life is much better now. One overexcited man blurts out that he used to live worse than a beast, but now lives like one, making Rain cringe and wish he'd talk less. Rain says goodbye and tells them to get back to work, then leaves with a small smile. Later, he studies floating status screens and grows frustrated. After searching all over the city, he still hasn't found anyone among the common people strong enough to meet the system's standards. A notice reminds him he must find and train 5 talented people, but so far he only has Rosalind. He briefly thinks about asking his sister or brother for help, then drops the idea. They already have enough trouble. He'll have to do this himself. In his room, Leah looks worried and gently says he's pushed himself too hard for 3 straight days. She also tells him notices have gone up across the city, asking anyone with talent to step forward. Rain gives a faint smile and says some do have ability, but they're better for factory work than the army. Then his mood drops. The factory is still shut down, the elf investors haven't delivered, and the dam needs at least 2 more weeks. He hugs Leah and sighs that making mages study chemistry feels wrong, but the system's task gives him no choice. The burden feels too heavy. Then shouting breaks the silence. Outside, someone calls another man a liar and demands to know how he dares show his face. A young man grins and boldly says, this time he won't fail. A new status screen appears before Rain, and he freezes. The boy has rare talent in both magic and strategy. Rain realizes he may have finally found someone useful. The boy, Armando, keeps arguing with a grumpy shopkeeper. He pulls out a bottle of glowing green liquid and claims 1 drop can keep any plant healthy for a full year. The shopkeeper folds his arms and reminds him that last time, he ruined a whole crate of apples. Armando quickly says the potion just doesn't work well on soft fruit, but the shopkeeper shoves him off and says never come back. Armando tries to beg, but gets nowhere. Watching from nearby, Rain is both amused and curious. He never expected to find someone like Armando here. Leah notices the change in Rain's face and quietly watches Armando leave. A bad feeling rises in her chest. If Rain is interested in this loud, flashy alchemist, she won't let him trick Rain. At the street corner, Armando sits down, tired and bitter. No one wanted his goods today, and he hasn't eaten a real meal since morning. Then a hand reaches out. He looks up and sees Rain. Calmly, Rain offers his hand and asks about the strange potion from earlier, saying he wants to hear more. Something in his tone makes Armando's eyes light up with hope. He jumps up, thinking he's finally found an easy customer, and starts talking fast, praising Rain for noticing the value of his work. He digs through his bag and pulls out small glass vials filled with swirling colors, but Rain doesn't even look at them. He just asks Armando's name and says he hasn't seen him around the city before. Armando cheerfully introduces himself as an alchemist who doesn't come here often, then boasts he can make anything Rain needs. Leah steps in and quietly warns Rain not to trust alchemists. Most of them, she says, are just smooth talkers who fool people. Rain only smiles and says time will show who's really trying to trick whom, leaving Leah confused. Then Rain points to the vials and asks the price. Armando grins, lifts 1 bottle, and launches into a dramatic sales pitch. The yellow one, he says, glows in the dark. Another makes the user move faster, and one, with a sly smile, can give a woman great pleasure for hours. Rain's face turns cold. He calls them useless trash and asks if Armando has anything actually valuable. That hits hard. Armando can handle doubt, but not open insult. He mutters that if that's how Rain wants it, he'll stop holding back. Leah catches the tone right away and watches him closely, ready to act. Unnerved by her stare, Armando jokes that she looks terrifying and asks if Rain's maid is always this ready to attack. Rain ignores him. Studying 1 vial, he explains the glowing potion is just a weak mix of beryllium zinc silicates and phosphorus, dim, toxic, and poorly made. A calcium-based phosphorus mix would shine brighter, be safer, and cost less. Armando stares in shock, then blurts out that the formula is his secret and demands to know how Rain knows it. Rain shrugs and says calling it a secret is silly. It's basic chemistry anyone can learn. If this is Armando's best work, then alchemy isn't very impressive after all. Furious, Armando points at Rain and accuses him of stealing his research, demanding again where he learned all this. Rain calmly says he'd never need to steal from a starving street alchemist who can't sell a single bottle. Then he makes an offer, swear loyalty, and he'll teach Armando real science. the truth behind alchemy, and the road to real power. Armando scoffs and crosses his arms, asking who Rain thinks he is. Leia steps forward and clearly introduces him as Rain Edgar, second son of Grand Duke Aldonian of the Kurtaral Empire. Armando only laughs harder, saying he first took Rain for a soft sheep, but now sees he's just a fat fish. With fire in his voice, Armando rejects the offer. He says he'd rather starve in the streets than ever serve a noble. Rain's face darkens, and he calmly says, Armando must really hate aristocrats. Armando answers with heavy sarcasm, acting polite as he says he'd never dare offend Rain, because who would be angry at a barking dog? Leia snaps. She steps forward and demands an apology at once. Armando cuts her off, mocking her for reaching for violence the second someone challenges her, and saying noble pride disappears fast when it gets tested. Leia tightens her stance, ready to strike, but Rain lifts a hand and stops her. Then he faces Armando and says evenly that he doesn't care what nobles did to him before. What he is offering is rare, a real chance to learn true chemistry and physics, and a chance to help shape the future with knowledge. But if Armando would rather stay outside Island City and rot there, then that's his choice to live with. Armando doesn't budge, standing there through pure stubbornness. When he hears Rain's offer, he only sees a trap hidden in smooth words. To him, nobles only chase power and money, then throw commoners away when they're done. So he makes himself a clear promise. He will never serve people like that. His refusal lands hard, and the loyalty number Rain has been watching drops from 50 to 30. Rain feels the weight of it at once. This isn't just a failed recruitment. It may be the start of a new enemy. Armando points straight at Rain and says no word from a noble can be trusted. His eyes burn with that belief. Then the heavy silence breaks when a young girl runs up to Armando with a bright smile, happily greeting him and asking when he got to the city. Armando freezes for a second, then quickly asks why she's in a dangerous place like this and tells her to leave at once. Her name is Yelena. Confused, she asks why he's acting so tense. Armando glances at Rain and says the man in front of them is a dangerous noble, so even children should stay far away. But Yelena doesn't. The moment she sees Rain clearly, she lights up and excitedly says she knows him, that he's really the same Rain from the stories. Surprised, Rain steps forward with a tired smile and gently asks if she really knows him. Yelena proudly says everyone in the city knows about Rain, and her mother always says their lives got better because of him. Without Rain, things would have been much worse. Rain asks if her father worked on the city's dam, and she eagerly says yes. She explains that her father used to be ruined by gambling, but everything changed after Rain gave him work. Now their home is peaceful, and she and her mother always tell him to work hard for Rain because their lives improve when he does. The warm moment does not last. Armando quickly pulls Yelena behind him and glares at Rain, accusing him of using the city's people like tools. He says Yelena's father was worked like a slave for barely any pay. Rain looks surprised, then annoyed. He asks why Armando believes that and who told him, wanting to know where this anger comes from. But Armando coldly says he doesn't need proof. To him, all nobles are greedy. He points at Yelena's worn, patched clothes and says that if Rain were honest, kids like her wouldn't still be dressed in rags. He calls Rain a hypocrite and says nobles pretend to care while common people sleep in the dirt. Leia can't stay silent anymore. Angry, she steps forward and says, Armando has no right to spread lies. He has no idea what Rain has done for the city. Because Rain believed in the people, the island is getting stronger and hope has come back. Yelena, once gentle, now stands firm beside Leia. She says every word Leia said is true. She tells Armando to stop speaking unfairly about Rain because he really is kind. He gave people jobs, shelter, and food, and because of him, they don't freeze through the nights anymore. Now they have homes and warm meals to eat. Then she warns him that if he keeps talking like this about Rain, she'll stop speaking to him. She reminds him he has never lived in the city, so he can't understand what Rain has really done. Her words hit hard, and for the first time, doubt flickers in his eyes. Rain notices and steps closer, calmly explaining that children like Yelena still wear old clothes, not because the city failed them, but because textile production is still growing. Food and shelter had to come first. Soon light industry will bring better jobs, decent clothes, and real dignity. Armando listens, but he doesn't change. He says he doesn't care about industry. What he believes, with his whole heart, is that nobles only care about themselves. Every kind act, he says, is just another trick born from greed. That's when Yelena breaks. Fighting tears, she cries that Armando hasn't listened to a word she said. Rain is not like the others. He is good and real. She begs him to stop, but Armando looks away, pain heavy in his eyes. He says softly that he doesn't want to watch another noble hide behind kindness, and warns Yelena that danger can hide behind smiling eyes. Rain says nothing as Armando walks off, but inside, his resolve hardens. It took too long to find someone this talented, and he can't let Armando go. Rain steps forward to stop him, but his body gives out. A deep tremor hits his vision blurs, and before he can speak, he collapses. When Rain wakes, he's in a familiar room, and Leia is sitting beside him. Her face brightens the second she sees him awake. He gives her a weak smile and tries to calm her, but tears spill down her face. She scolds him for pushing himself again, for going out alone, and for working until his body broke down. She says he never listens, and always carries everything on his own. Rain gently takes her hand and promises he'll start taking care of himself from now on. But one question stays in his mind. Had Armando already left? Leah slowly shakes her head, still surprised. She says that after Rain collapsed and was brought back to the city lord's estate, something strange happened. Armando came back. He left a small medicine, saying it would help Rain recover, then slipped away as quietly as he arrived. Rain's eyes widen. He asks if she gave him the medicine, and if that's why his fever went down so quickly. Leah softly laughs and says she'd never risk her lord's health on medicine from someone she doesn't know, even if he meant well. She called the best doctors in the city instead, and their treatment brought Rain back. As for the medicine, she put it safely on his desk. Rain asks to see it. Leah offers to bring it, telling him to stay in bed and rest. When he finally holds it, he studies it closely. Its clear color and careful design show real skill and effort. He says it should be tested by the city's doctors tomorrow, but Leah hesitates. She asks if Rain still plans to recruit Armando. The man is proud, openly rude to nobles, and clearly full of anger. Rain answers right away. Yes, Armando isn't just gifted. He's the kind of genius who could help build a better future for the city. With guidance, he could change everything. But Rain knows reason and offers won't be enough. Hatred that deep doesn't come from nowhere. Something dark must be hiding behind it. Far away, in a silent room, Armando stands alone staring at an old photo. Pain fills his eyes like an old wound opening again. In a whisper, he thinks about the strange noble he met. Someone different, someone who saw through his alchemy formula at a glance. He admits he's confused and still doesn't understand much of what Rain said. Even Yelena, someone he deeply trusts, seems to be on the noble's side. His grip tightens, and in a low voice, he swears to his master not to worry, vowing never to fall for a noble's lies. He promises to finish their research and make the nobles pay for their crimes. Hatred burns in his eyes. At the same time, in the holy temple, Rain sits in silence as Saint Uria reveals why Armando hates nobles so deeply. She speaks of a woman in the old photo, Lizelle, from 15 years ago, once the most brilliant alchemist in Iceland, a genius who believed alchemy should help everyone, not just the rich. She adopted Armando when he was a homeless orphan, feeding him, teaching him, and giving him all she had. She gave Armando all her knowledge, and their bond became more than teacher and student. Lizelle was his mother in every way but blood. She taught him more than alchemy. She gave him values too, how to balance skill with kindness and science with people. Then that small world broke apart. Lizelle's work to help ordinary people angered a powerful noble in old Iceland. He had her home raided, stole her research, and framed her for forbidden magic. The charge was false, and her so-called accident was no accident. Armando was only 15 when the person he loved most was taken from him by greed and cruelty. After she died, he gathered what was left: notes, rough plans, torn pages, and swore to finish her work no matter the cost. As Saint Uria tells it, tears run down her face. Armando still carries Lizelle's legacy and the crushing loneliness of a boy who lost his only family. Rain listens in silence, then says the story is tragic, but it still doesn't answer what he really wants to know. He asks Uria where Armando is now. Uria snaps, asking if Rain has any compassion. Rain stays firm. Compassion alone won't feed people, rebuild the city, or move it forward. Every day the world keeps moving and they have to move with it. Her anger fades. With a tired sigh, Uria says Armando is likely hiding at Lizelle's old house, where her notes and tools are still kept. Rain rises at once. Now that he knows the place, they need to leave immediately. But before going, Rain asks one more thing: what Lizelle was working on before she died. The question makes Uria stop. After a pause, she answers. It had something to do with steam. Rain's eyes widen, and his calm finally breaks. He steps closer and asks her to say it again. She nervously confirms it, not knowing why it matters so much. Rain grabs her shoulders, full of hope. If he's right, this could change everything. Not through war or politics, but through how the world works, builds, and lives. Still stunned, Uria asks if it could really be that important. She says someone once called it just a toy. Rain cuts her off and tells her to take him to Lizelle's house now. She agrees, asking him to slow down, but Rain is already moving. His mind races. If Lizelle was studying the steam engine and left real plans and records behind, then this could start a whole new age. In his old world, steam engines were basic history, but as a mechanical engineer, he still knows the theory and physics by heart. What he lacks is the first working model and solid proof. If Lizelle's notes have that, then the key to a revolution is right there. At Lizelle's old house, Armando works over a rough machine. It hisses softly before he suddenly senses someone coming. He throws a cloth over it, steps outside, and coldly demands why Rain is here. This place is off limits. Rain doesn't back down. He asks where Lizelle's research is and says he wants to see her notes for himself. Armando stiffens at once. He doesn't care how Rain found out about them. He'll never hand Lizelle's writings to Rain or any noble. Seeing the tension rise, Uria quickly steps in. She tells Armando they aren't here to steal anything. Rain only wants to know if Lizelle's work can help the people of the city. Armando ignores her, pulls a combat knife from his coat, and points it straight at Rain. Nobles like him, he growls, don't belong here. This place is sacred. Leia instantly reaches for the dagger under her cloak, ready to protect Rain. But Rain raises a hand and tells her to stay back. he'll deal with this himself. Then he steps closer to Armando and meets his stare. Rain calls him a fool. By hiding Lazelle's work, he's betraying her dream and letting her genius rot under fear and pride. Armando fires back, furious. What right does Rain have to lecture him? How could a noble understand Lazelle's work better than the one who gave his life to it? Rain gives a cold smile. Logic won't work here, so he offers a wager. The only way he sees to win Armando's trust, or at least force his cooperation. Armando scoffs and asks what kind of wager. Rain calmly lays it out. If he can make Lazelle's alchemical machine work, Armando will serve him without complaint. If he fails, he'll leave Island City for good. Armando laughs in his face, mocking the idea that a spoiled noble who barely knows lab tools could bring Lazelle's invention to life. But Rain expected that reaction. Under the mockery, he can tell Armando has accepted the challenge. Still, Armando adds one more condition. If Rain fails, he must kneel at Lazelle's grave and apologize. Yuria protests at once, saying that's too far. Rain hasn't done anything to deserve that. Armando doesn't care. To him, every noble is guilty. He stares at Rain and asks if he dares accept. Rain agrees without hesitation. If he fails, he'll bow at Lazelle's grave himself. With the bet set, he turns to the covered machine and tells Armando to move so he can inspect it. Rain stays calm on the outside, but inside he's thrilled. If he fixes the steam engine, Armando will have no choice but to follow him. He can already picture it. Armando pulls off the cloth, revealing a huge, awkward machine covered in gears and pipes. He warns Rain not to break it. It is priceless. Leia and Yuria stare in shock, unable to make sense of the strange thing or Rain's obsession with it. Rain runs his hands over the machine, hardly able to contain his excitement. It's a steam engine, or close to one. After a long look, he says Lazelle was a true genius, not just in theory, but in building it. Hearing that praise for his mentor affects Armando. His pride softens, and he agrees. Lazelle was the real thing, unlike all the fake alchemists who don't understand the basics. Rain asks if Armando has been living here all this time just to make the machine work. Armando nods. Lazelle never left instructions for using it. Her notes explain the ideas, but not how to run it. Rain says they need to open it and check the inside, but Armando immediately calls him insane. If they take it apart and can't rebuild it, everything will be ruined. Rain's face hardens. He says Armando clearly doesn't know who he's talking to. There isn't a machine he can't fix. Then he holds out his hand and asks for a screwdriver. Armando just stares, not even knowing what that is. Rain sighs, amazed the machine was built at all if Armando doesn't know basic tools. Armando shrugs and says it was assembled with magic. The parts were made by dwarven craftsmen hired by Lazelle, far beyond what a pampered noble like Rain could understand. Rain rolls his eyes and tells him to be quiet. If there are no screwdrivers, he'll manage another way. He turns to Leah and asks for her dagger. Using the blade, he starts taking the machine apart with care. The more he sees, the more amazed he gets. Lazelle's work is precise, advanced, and brilliant. But as he digs deeper, his excitement fades. Something is wrong. Important parts are missing. He looks at Armando and sharply asks where the inner components are, the ones that should be at the machine's core. Armando freezes, caught off guard. He tries to brush it off, saying Rain is imagining things or making excuses before failing. Rain doesn't buy it. He points to the empty mounts and demands the truth. The control system is gone, something the machine needs to work. Pressed into silence, Armando finally admits the missing pieces were stolen by a noble. Rain is stunned and asks why anyone would steal such specific alchemical parts. Armando bitterly explains that they were made from a rare, valuable mineral. Once a noble learned that, he took them and melted them down. Not for research, but to make a flashy statue of himself. Rain's face darkens with anger. He asks who the noble is and where to find him. Armando says the man is far too powerful for even Rain to touch. Rain steps closer, shaking with rage, and says no one is beyond his reach. He orders Armando to talk, demanding the name of the person blocking his industrial revolution. Armando clenches his fists, then finally spits it out. Duke Eska. The name makes Saint Yuria gasp in shock. Rain turns to her at once, silently asking who Eska is. Yuria explains that Duke Eska began as a low major name through his alchemy work. In time, the emperor favored him and gave him more than praise. He made him a duke with land of his own. Rain asks where that land is, and Yuria says it's Grand, northeast of Itheron. Leia adds that Grand serves Grand Duke Tyrese Elroy, not the Edgar family, so it's outside Rain's reach. That name hits him hard. He remembers his father talking about bad blood between their house and Elroy's. Leia confirms it. They clash often in court, part of the emperor's plan to keep both sides in check. Rain quickly sees this isn't a fight he can take head on yet, so he turns back to the man who ruined Lazelle's invention, Duke Eska. Rain vows to make him pay many times over. Yuria nervously asks if he really plans to go after Duke Eska. Rain says paying isn't enough. Eska will suffer for this. Leia goes quiet at the anger in his voice, and Armando, still unsure, asks if he's serious about challenging someone that powerful. Rain meets his eyes and says he'll not only fix the steam engine, but also make Eska understand what he destroyed. Then he asks Armando if Lazelle's notes include designs for the missing gears. Armando says no. The notes only cover theory. The real design was worked out with a dwarven smith who now refuses to see him. Rain tells him to leave that to him, but Armando warns that Bram is stubborn and quick to anger. Later, Rain's group reaches Bram's workshop. The dwarf immediately tells them to leave, barking that he has no time for spoiled nobles. Yuria quickly steps in and begs him to listen. She reminds Bram of what Rain has done for Iceland, driving out corrupt nobles and getting food to the poor. Bram scoffs, saying he knows exactly who Rain is, a noble kid playing hero. Maybe he's done some good, but Bram isn't impressed. Feeding people is a lord's basic duty, same as forging is a blacksmith's. No one gets praised just for doing their job, so why should Rain? To Bram's surprise, Rain agrees. He says caring for the people is exactly a lord's duty, and that's why he's here now. Bram studies him, then asks if he's here to order something forged. Rain says he needs the gear designs Lizelle once commissioned, or better yet, Bram to make the gears again. The moment he hears that, Bram's face hardens. He explodes and orders them out, and Rain realizes there's pain behind that anger. Bram admits those gears led to Lizelle's death. He blames himself, saying his advice to use dragon crystal ore drew the noble's attention. Shaking with guilt, he swears he'll never make anything like that again. Armando throws Bram's own words back at him. If a blacksmith's duty is to forge, why refuse now? Bram snaps that no means no. Even with dragon crystal ore, it still wouldn't work. Rain catches that detail right away. Those special gears must be essential to making Lizelle's engine run. Bram's eyes shift for a second, then he hides it. Rain presses him, asking if a master smith like Bram really can't make working gears from normal iron. Or at least try. That sets Bram off. He points at the iron ore nearby and says no forge on the continent can melt it into liquid. Only the ancient dragon tribe could do that. He tells Rain to stop chasing impossible dreams. Rain goes quiet for a moment, then asks if Bram's forge simply can't reach the heat needed to melt iron. Bram looks at him like he's stupid and says no forge alive can do it. Then he mocks Rain for not knowing something so basic. Rain just smiles and asks what Bram would say if he could build a forge hot enough to melt iron ore. For a split second, Bram looks interested, but hides it and calls Rain a braggart. If such a forge existed, it would change metalworking across the empire. So what makes a noble boy think he can talk like that? Rain ignores the insult and asks one thing. If he really can build that forge, will Bram make the missing parts for the steam engine? Certain Rain will fail. Bram agrees. Rain feels a surge of relief. He finally got Bram's word. Then he turns serious and tells Bram to prepare the iron ore. As Bram leaves, he warns that if Rain fails, he better never come back. Once he's gone, Rain studies the forge, knowing it can't get anywhere near iron's melting point. The real problem is airflow. Without enough oxygen, the fuel can't burn hot enough. So Rain grabs a hammer and slams the forge 4 times, opening large holes in its side. Elria rushes over in shock, and Armando yells that he's lost his mind. He just wrecked Bram's forge. Rain calmly tells them not to panic. The holes are extra air inlets. With more oxygen, the fire will burn much hotter. Elria doesn't understand any of it and wonders if something that simple can really melt iron ore. Rain tells her not to underestimate science. Add more fuel, and this furnace will do it. Just then, Bram comes back carrying iron ore. The second he sees the holes, he freezes, then erupts in rage. He demands to know how Rain dared damage the forge he worked so hard to build and vows to make him pay. Rain tells him to calm down and says the furnace can now melt iron. Bram refuses to believe it. He shouts that forging isn't a game and asks how punching holes in a forge would do anything but let heat escape. Rain doesn't bother arguing. He tells Bram to start smelting. They have the ore and fuel, so the result will speak for itself. Still furious, Bram agrees just to see what trick Rain is pulling. He warns that if this fails, he'll beat him senseless, then starts the smelting. Everyone but Rain watches in tense silence. Soon their eyes widen. The iron begins to melt, and liquid metal starts flowing out. Elria gasps. It worked. Armando turns to Rain, full of questions, but Rain only smiles and looks at Bram. He asks what he thinks now. Bram stares like he's just woken from a dream, speechless as his expression changes. Bram went from stunned to thrilled. He couldn't believe Rain made the furnace hot enough to melt iron ore just by adding 2 holes. Rain casually said it was based on airflow. If Bram wanted, he could explain it later. For now, Rain wanted him to forge the gear Miss Lizzle had left behind. Bram's excitement faded, but he sighed and agreed since Rain had won the bet. He did warn that if that noble came back to cause trouble, he wouldn't answer for what happened. Rain's gaze turned cold. He said if the noble didn't come to him, then he would go find him. After fixing the furnace so it could melt the iron billets, Rain finished the last missing part for the steam engine. With the gear done, he and the others rushed back to Lizzle's lab. Rain carefully checked it and couldn't hide his smile. At last, he had the key part needed to complete the steam engine, a huge step toward bringing industry into this world of magic. Leia still looked worried. The gear seemed solid, but she asked if Rain was sure it could handle the steam engine's heavy strain. If it cracked, he could get hurt. Elria quickly agreed and suggested asking her tribe for dragon crystal ore instead, since that would be much safer. As an experienced engineer, Rain just smiled and said there was no need. Miss Lizzle used dragon crystal ore only because her knowledge of industrial engineering was limited. Armando frowned at that and asked Rain not to speak so rudely about his master. Rain let out a small laugh, looked at him sharply, and reminded him to worry about himself first. If Rain repaired the steam engine, Armando would have to become his subordinate, just as agreed. Armando clenched his fists, but said he'd keep his word if Rain truly fixed it. Then Rain placed the gear into the empty slot. Each part locked together perfectly, and joy surged through him. Once everything was secure, he called everyone over to witness a miracle. Then he slowly pulled the lever. Just as he expected, the steam engine shook for a moment, then settled into a steady rhythm. Thick white steam hissed from the boiler with a deep roar, like the sound of a new age beginning. Elria cheered that it was working and praised Rain's skill and smarts. As the machine ran, Armando stood in the white steam, silent and overwhelmed. He never thought he would live to see the miracle his master had devoted her life to creating brought back to life. In that moment, endless memories flooded his mind. He remembered his teacher and their long journeys into unknown lands, her fiery lessons on metallurgy, and even the times she scolded him for mistakes. Joyful or painful, every one of those memories was precious to Armando and would stay with him forever. When Lizzle first completed the steam engine, she was exhausted from days of work, but her eyes shone with excitement. She believed this machine would slowly improve people's lives, but it was also the cause of the tragedy that took the master he admired most. Years of buried feelings burst out at once, and Armando collapsed to the ground. Through sobs, he cried that his master's dream had finally come true. Elria looked worried and glanced at Rain for guidance, but he just shook his head. Armando needed to cry. These were feelings he had held in for too long. Letting them out would help him regain his calm. 3 hours later, Lizzle's lab got another visitor, Bram the blacksmith. He came out of curiosity, unable to understand how a plain iron part could make the steam engine run. After seeing it himself, Bram looked confused. To him, the machine just made smoke. Elria agreed, though she was still impressed by a machine working without magic. As for real use, it didn't seem to do much beyond that. Hearing this, Rain could only sigh. Before he could explain, Bram shook his head and said with some sarcasm that the thing was useless. Just smoke and noise. That was enough for Rain to step forward. Calm but firm, he told them this machine was called a steam engine, and it was not just something that puffed out smoke. It was the foundation of an industrial civilization. The strange words left everyone staring at Rain in confusion, like he had said something crazy. Running a hand over the machine, Rain explained that it could produce strong force, turn gears, and power many other machines. Textile mills, vehicles, and even war machines. In the future, all of them could run on this. The steam engine was one of the greatest inventions in human history. Elria didn't fully understand, but she could still feel how big his vision was. Bram crossed his arms and nodded, partly impressed but still doubtful. He admitted Rain's explanation sounded amazing, but asked if the machine was really as incredible as he claimed. Rain smiled with total confidence. He said Bram's doubts were fair, but soon they would all see its value. From now on, he would lead them step by step into the world of industry so they could witness its true power themselves. His words brought new energy to the room and sparked lively talk among the group. But then a distant voice urgently shouted for Rain. It was Rosalind, riding toward them on horseback. As soon as she arrived, she jumped down, hurried to Rain, bowed, and said Lady Priscilla had just arrived in their territory. Hearing that his sister had come, Rain immediately brightened. He and Priscilla were especially close. And with the dam nearly finished, this was the perfect chance to convince her to invest more in his industrial plans. Rosalind quickly added that Priscilla had a message. She had prepared a special gift for Rain and wanted him back right away. Rain's eyes lit up at once as he wondered if the gift was gold or banknotes. Maybe he wouldn't even need to ask for money this time. Unable to hold back, he asked Rosalind what kind of gift his sister had prepared. Rosalind's face turned serious, and in a slower voice she said it was a group of newly grown young women. Rain's eyes widened in shock. He stared in total confusion, never expecting his sister to send something like that. Only one thought hit him. This gift really did not suit him at all.